playing as Tathagata in Marvel, I suppressed Thanos for 500 years. This video is purely for entertainment and does not infringe on copyrights or laws. The rights to the novel and image belong to the original author. We do not claim ownership. Don't like waiting and want to listen to this fanfic in full now? Subscribe to our Patreon, where you'll find the best fanfics. 145. Chapter 144 The End of the World. 145. Chapter 144, The End of the World, 2024-09-10 Author, Gwegwe Monster. Chapter 144, The End of the World. Every journalist dreams of winning a Pulitzer Prize. To win, reporters rush to cover the most dangerous events: war, famine, devastating wildfires, epidemic epicenters, like moths to flame. The dark cloud crisis over Renton could be arguably the most dangerous and consequential event of the year. After all, if mishandled, all of humanity would perish. Like all his colleagues, this reporter, swimming against the tide, raced to Renton to capture the most inspiring images of the crisis response. He had previously taken several photos of Professor Vincent and other experts, but they always felt they weren't unique enough. Now, after capturing this photo, he practically guaranteed it would be his. Not only for the visually stunning spectacle, but also for the meaning behind it. Humanity had once again escaped an almost irresistible natural disaster, and it was this savior, Yang Jian, who had accomplished it. With a single punch, he had ushered in a new life for humanity. From now on, this great god would surely be the spiritual totem shared by all of humanity. Lin Feng, of course, noticed someone secretly photographing him, but he paid it no mind. At that moment, he was brimming with satisfaction, savoring the overwhelming, exhilarating power of that punch. Though only a tenth of Erlang Shen's power, even at full force, it was still too much for humanity and the earth to withstand. He had thought he wouldn't have a chance to truly fight, but unexpectedly, he had this opportunity to unleash his full might and domineering aura. Lin Feng himself wasn't sure how much of the dark dimension he had shattered, but it was certainly a significant amount. A leader of the Dark Elves had even fallen to his fist, a universe away. This achievement filled Lin Feng with immense satisfaction. For a while, the Dark Elves would likely be unable to organize another invasion. On the contrary, having been severely damaged, they should be wary of other parallel universes taking advantage of the situation to devour them. All of this had nothing to do with Lin Feng, and nothing to do with Earth. Lin Feng slowly exhaled, retreating from his overbearing, heroic mood and regaining his composure. He glanced at his performance results. They were truly impressive. He had directly received 25,000 performance points, and his shock value was rising at a rate of 30,000 to 40,000 per second. So far, it had accumulated tens of millions of shock points, and the rate of increase hadn't slowed, it continued to rise. At this rate, it looked like the shock value would soon exceed 100 million. People around the world had indeed still not recovered from their shock. So stunned, so preoccupied with Yang Jian himself, that most took a moment to recover. The crisis was resolved, meaning this universe was safe, which also meant we survived. The end of the world was abruptly interrupted. We can just go on with our lives, right? Only then did they remember their excitement at having escaped death. Excitement spread faster than a cold virus, and suddenly, thunderous cheers echoed from every corner of the world. We survived, this is all thanks to the great god Yang Jian protecting us. Damn it, I'll never believe in any gods or Buddhas again, I'll just believe in the great god Yang Jian. How can you call the great god by his name? You should respectfully address him as Erlang Zion Sheng's Henjin. Will the Cultural and Tourism Bureau really not consider converting the temple into a temple dedicated to Erlang Shen? I don't want to worship any other gods now, I only want to worship Erlang Shen. The Chinese people were in an uproar, and the foreigners were no less enthusiastic. Before there was Tathagata Buddha, and now there's Yang Jian. How many gods does China really have? Who said China had no gods before? Liar, is it too late to become a Chinese citizen now? If something like what happened in Renton happens again, which country besides China could have gods to withstand such an event? Everyone, Chinese and foreign, was stunned by the sheer force of that single punch that averted the apocalyptic crisis. This shock immediately transformed into a continuous flow of shock value towards Lin Feng. The rate of increase was so dramatic that even though Lin Feng had experienced rapid increases in shock value before, he was still slightly shocked. If he stayed here and let everyone watch, perhaps the increase would be even greater. But Lin Feng didn't linger. After watching the shock value and roll value rise, he transformed into a beam of divine light and left Renton. Neither those near Renton nor those who had seen him through the live broadcast could clearly see how he disappeared, which triggered another surge in shock value. At Stonehenge, Nick Fury looked up at the sky. A magnificent, breathtaking night was drawing to a close. A ray of red light appeared in the eastern sky, and iridescent clouds drifted between two towering boulders. A gentle morning breeze blew, and a new day was about to arrive, just like any other day that arrived as planned. All was well. In this peaceful dawn, Nick Fury's heart was filled with a surge of shock and longing, lingering for a long time. Uncontrollably, the thought came to him again. No wonder Tony chose China. With such divine protection, the most brilliant and mysterious civilization, and the most united people, China was truly alluring. No wonder, he kept muttering, unable to help but drift off into trance. Steve Rogers stood behind him, still recovering from his shock and terror. The man who had slammed himself to the ground with one punch had been smashed to pieces by another. This power comparison made him realize more clearly than anyone else the immense power Yang Jian possessed. If a Yang Jian of such immense power were to oppose the Americans, then the Americans. Steve Rogers pulled out every weapon he could find, along with every supernatural being within SHIELD, and ran through his thoughts. It didn't take much for him to come to a conclusion: he couldn't defeat him. He was simply invincible. His power far exceeded the limits of human endurance. The meager powers possessed by the mutants pale in comparison to him. Steve Rogers couldn't help but think of the Tathagata Buddha who had appeared in Hong Kong. Under his compassionate gaze, countless people, apparently already dead, rose to their feet, as if nothing had happened. Humanity today can only delay death through methods like freezing, but cannot reverse it or bring the king back to life. This alone demonstrates that the Tathagata Buddha is a powerful deity that humans cannot afford to provoke. After all, between killing a living person and resurrecting a dead person, the latter is ultimately more difficult to accomplish. 146. Chapter 145, Post-Disaster Carnival. 146. Chapter 145, Post-Disaster Carnival 2024-09-10 Author, Good Monster. Chapter 145, Post-Disaster Carnival. Thinking of this, Steve Rogers suspected that during the Zhangjiang incident, the Tathagata Buddha hadn't even exerted his full power, merely testing his skill. Perhaps Yang Jian felt the same way now. Just by relaxing his muscles, he could resolve a crisis that even a united humanity couldn't resist. If this isn't a god, then what else could be called a god? Steve Rogers felt goosebumps break out at the thought, and a deep chill ran through his heart. China already possessed two such gods, and perhaps even more in the future. This meant that the world would never be the same again. Even without mentioning the gods, the will, unity, cohesion, execution, and military strength demonstrated by China during this incident were far greater than those of the United States. It's unlikely that the United States will ever again be the world's sole superpower, the hegemon and beacon of humanity as it once was. In space, the two astronauts, Tony Stark and Bruce Banner, also received the message. In fact, they didn't need a relay. They could see the white light flickering from Earth with their naked eyes. Even without close observation, Tony Stark, with his understanding of cosmology and energetics, and his own superheroic powers, could sense the power of that heaven-shattering punch and shudder. A fist can actually deliver such force, without relying on technology or external energy sources. Relying solely on his own strength, a single punch had already replenished the energy needed to reverse the cosmic barrier. He knew better than anyone the immense energy required to repair the cosmic barrier, and he also understood the significance of the momentary dark clouds dissipating the sky and the instantaneous return to clear sky. It meant that the force of that punch had caused an overabundance of energy. The collision of two parallel universes was no match for this man's single punch. As expected of a Chinese god, coming to China might be the best decision I've ever made. Professor Lin Feng said there are gods and Buddhas in China. Do all of them possess such incredible power? When I get back, I must visit Professor Lin Feng as soon as possible. I must. Countless thoughts raced through his mind as Tony Stark muttered softly, his expression still serious, but his frown had relaxed. The apocalyptic crisis had been easily averted. They no longer had to worry about landing, or about gazing upon a lifeless, scorched earth upon landing. While Renton had suffered a devastating blow, it was only to this extent. Compared to the worst-case scenario of the entire human race perishing, this loss was completely tolerable. For humanity, this was the best possible outcome. Not only Tony Stark, but Bruce Banner was also reeling from the shock of that punch. Beyond shock, Zhou Hao and Zhang Yang felt a surge of pride. Proud that this was their Chinese god. On the ground, all TV channels, online programs, and radio programs were following up on the Lenten incident. Coincidentally, all the programs began with the 3 words daybreak as their titles. Kang Zhen, who had appeared on the big screen not long ago to announce the bad news to everyone, appeared on the big screen again. But this time, he had a smile on his face. As the top news host, he always remained calm even when faced with a catastrophe, but at this moment, he could not hide the excitement in his eyes. Dear viewers, good morning, welcome to Greet the Sunrise on August 16th. I believe everyone has already understood what happened last night. The entire Earth has experienced a devastating blow and has been struggling on the brink of collapse all night. We tried various methods, but all ended in failure. We can only hopelessly wait for death. Fortunately, we still have a powerful guardian angel. Hearing the 3 words guardian angel coming out of Kang Zhen's mouth, many people felt a little strange. As a CCTV anchor, it's a basic rule to avoid supernatural matters. Words like gods, and guardian god shouldn't appear on the news broadcast. But thinking about Yang Jian's performance last night, everyone agreed that these 3 words were the most appropriate description. Besides the reports from official TV stations and other media outlets, the trending topics on social media platforms like Weibo, WeChat, TikTok, and Kuaishou were the only 2 topics on the internet: the London incident and Yang Jian's guardian god. The end of the world easily ends. Erlang Shen, fighting for your life. How powerful was that punch? Destiny is determined by heaven. Fortune is yours. Of the 50 trending terms, Yang Jian dominated the top 30. This wasn't just the case in China. Twitter trends overseas mirror the trend. People around the world, in different languages, typed the same word, Yang Jian. As if it could survive tens of thousands of years on the moon. It's truly formidable. Just watching it on screen isn't thrilling enough. I really hope to be there in person next time, witnessing the majestic Yang Jian up close. In contrast to these comments, a flood of vignettes has taken the internet by storm. Numerous vignettes have appeared on both foreign YouTube platforms and domestic zines. Yang Jian's first appearance, his powerful punch that shatters the heavens, and his solitary silhouette after all is calm. No stirring or mysterious music or filters are needed, simply posting these simple moments is enough to captivate viewers. The most viewed video on zines, One Punch Breaks the Heavens, was pushed to the front page by spontaneous viewers within minutes of its release. In just 30 minutes, it surpassed 50 million views, and the number continues to rise. Many who came to admire his majestic presence were left in a state of confusion, only to find the video was so overwhelmed with viewers that it became a PowerPoint presentation. I guarantee it'll hide over 100 million views today, absolutely. Just based on this lag, this has to be the fastest video to hit 100 million views in the history of Zimu. Weibo was briefly paralyzed by the frenzy of people refreshing and commenting. The audience's enthusiasm didn't fade. They discussed the matter across platforms and communities, sparking a frenzy of public opinion. Yang Jian, a name and a presence so unfamiliar just a few days ago, has now become a deeply embedded word in the minds of people around the world. Although no one knows his history or his role in the ancient world, one thing is certain: he is powerful, he is domineering, and he dares to challenge the heavens. He successfully saved humanity from disaster. The world was engulfed in a sea of ecstasy, with only one place remaining silent. 147. Chapter 146. What's the problem? 147. Chapter 146. What's the problem again? 2024-09-10. Author, Good Monster. Chapter 146. What's the problem again? The only quiet place is Renton. As the main battlefield, it suffered a devastating blow. Those buildings, whether old or new, were transformed into broken wells and ruins by the strong shock wave. Most of Renton was completely turned into scorched earth, and the remaining half was also crumbling. Countless smoke filled the destroyed streets, and rubble and broken bones almost filled the entire Thames. Half was scorched earth, and half was ruins. Under the shining of the rising sun, the decaying city looked even more desolate. The survivors in the ruins were trying to climb out, but suddenly heard continuous roars. They were startled and hid themselves deeper. Those roars came from the mouths of monsters with black scales. These monsters were transformed by Malachus using the power of the reality gem. Most of the monsters were slain in the aftermath of Yang Jian's punch, but a few managed to escape unscathed in the streets. Furthermore, there were some dark elves from Wadalheim. When the divine light emanated, they dared not appear, fearing the burns of the divine light. Now that Yang Jian had departed, they sensed the powerful, oppressive force had vanished, and they reappeared, burning, slaughtering, and looting throughout the city. Just hours ago, these dark elves and other alienated monsters had been a major threat to humanity. After and during the apocalyptic crisis, their fear of them had diminished. They had survived such a terrifying crisis, so how could these tiny monsters pose a threat? Even so, the mere sound of their voices still evoked fear, fearing they would become victims of their madness before their destruction. Most of the residents of Lenton carefully concealed themselves, daring not to show their faces, quietly awaiting the moment of their counterattack. Beside the rectangular machine, Professor Vincent shut down his machine and looked up at the aquamarine sky and the desolate city of Lenton, feeling a mixture of excitement and sadness. He was thrilled to be alive, thrilled that the world had finally escaped death, yet also saddened that Lenton, where he had been born and raised, had become the greatest casualty of this disaster. But the sadness lasted only a moment, before he suppressed it with a determined effort. After all, as long as humanity remained, it wouldn't take long for the world to regain its former glory and prosperity. A small force arrived, groping through the ruins, where streets and towns were no longer recognizable, to kill the dark elves and alienated humans. At the sound of gunfire, countless hidden humans emerged from their hiding places and headed towards the only remaining intact building in the devastated city of London, the Greenwich Observatory. Professor Vincent was stunned by this scene, confused as to what they were up to. Have they been contaminated by the dark cloud, becoming new mutants? The thought flashed through his mind, but the next moment, he saw a little girl pause at the shattered gate of the Greenwich Observatory. She pulled a broken candle from her arms and placed it in the ground. She knelt on her knees, clasped her hands together, and prayed devoutly. The little girl's face and body were dusty, her beautiful blonde hair disheveled from dodging, and her hands bore scratches from broken tiles. Tears welled in her beautiful blue eyes, reflecting the golden candlelight, like an angel fallen to earth. Behind her, countless others knelt, some weeping, some laughing, some prostrating themselves, some paying homage. They all chanted a single name, Yang Jian, Yang Jian. They had believed she would surely perish, vanishing forever with the apocalypse, but unexpectedly, a sudden turn of events would lead to the emergence of a hero like Yang Jian, saving the world. His strength, his bravery, his dominance, were a powerful balm for those on the brink of collapse. He not only saved their lives, but also their spirits. Yet, they had no way to express their gratitude, only a small token of respect and reverence. Young and old, men and women, unanimously chanted the two words Yang Jian in their own uncharacteristically off-key voices. Each off-key call sounded comical on its own, but when combined into a sea of murmurs, it carried a lasting and profound resonance. It was the most sincere call from the survivors to their savior. The drones continued to record, the scattered candlelight on the scorched earth, the grateful cries of Yang Jian echoing across the world. Those who witnessed this scene, slightly shaken from their revelry, looked on in silence and compassion, praying for the residents of London. Soon, people around the world also held spontaneous candlelight vigils, filming them and sending their wishes to the residents of London. As long as people are still alive, lost things will surely return. Don't give up hope. Millions of people in this world will bless you and help you. Erlang Shen will protect you. Lin Feng paid no attention to what the residents of Renton did, nor to the online public opinion. After removing Yang Jian's skin, he immediately returned to his residence. Loki was waiting at Lin Feng's residence. He paid no attention to the ordinary people, only to the events in Renton. He witnessed the power of Yang Jian's sky-shattering punch, and was shocked. It once again confirmed Lin Feng's omniscience and strengthened his resolve. Seeing that everything had been resolved, but Lin Feng still hadn't returned, Loki couldn't help but feel anxious, and he kept looking out the door. Suddenly, he felt his body stiffen, and he felt an inexplicable, oppressive presence behind him. A chill ran through his heart, and he shivered unconsciously. He hurriedly turned his head and met Lin Feng's smiling, deep eyes. His heart skipped a beat, and he took a step back, managing to calm himself and offer a wry smile. "Professor Lin Feng, when did you get back?" Lin Feng continued to smile at him, and that glance made Loki feel as if he'd been seen through from the inside out. He opened his mouth, but words faltered in fear. Lin Feng walked straight towards the sofa. Loki realized he was blocking the way and quickly stepped aside. He saw Lin Feng standing by the coffee table, pouring a cup of tea and holding it in his hands. He looked calm and composed. He didn't answer his question, nor did he ask how he came to his house. Loki couldn't help but feel a little apprehensive, but then he realized he had come to seek refuge with Professor Lin Feng and didn't need to fear his unfathomable nature. On the contrary, the more unfathomable Professor Lin was, the more it proved his vast knowledge and hidden talents, and the better it would be for him to join him. This thought made him feel relieved, and he bowed slightly to Lin Feng. "Long time no see, Professor." Lin Feng nodded calmly, sat down on the sofa, and looked at him with amusement while stroking his teacup. "You have another question for me, right?" 148. Chapter 147 Loki comes to be an assistant. 148. Chapter 147 Loki comes to be his assistant. 2024-09-10 Author, Good Monster. Chapter 147 Loki comes to be his assistant. Loki was slightly stunned when he didn't expect him to be so straightforward, and then he felt a little guilty. Professor Lin Feng has always told him everything he knows, and he trusts him very much until now, and he is not stingy in answering any of his questions. But he betrayed Professor Lin's trust, and tried to get the skin of a tiger, which almost caused a disaster. Thinking of this, Loki shook his head and looked up at Lin Feng. "No, I don't have any questions to ask this time. I just want to be honest with Professor Lin." Honest, he stammered, but couldn't continue. For Loki, who is used to lying, being honest is really a difficult thing, and the words just can't come out. Lin Feng seemed to see his dilemma. He smiled and offered a hint of encouragement. "If you don't want to say it, don't say it. If you do, don't hesitate. I don't really care whether people lie to me or are honest." Loki was taken aback again, but then, encouraged by Lin Feng's words, he spoke without hesitation. "Actually, I'm a prince from Asgard. My name is Loki. I'm sorry for deceiving Professor Lin before." Lin Feng smiled faintly, his face light and carefree. Inwardly, he was laughing at the fact that this guy, known for his cunning, wasn't as cunning as the legend said. "It's been so long, and I still don't know who's deceiving whom. If you weren't so easily fooled, I really wouldn't have earned so many points." Thinking this over, but not showing it on his face, Lin Feng sipped his tea, looked at Loki calmly, and smiled. "It's okay. I knew that a long time ago." Loki was shocked, his pupils shrinking slightly. How could he know? He wondered as he thought. "Since you know my identity, then why?" Lin Feng smiled again, his face light and carefree. "In my eyes, all lives are equal, and all have the right to knowledge. If you're willing to seek my advice, I'm willing to teach you. No special reason is necessary. Besides, God has his own plans. He arranged for you to ask me, which naturally means that some destiny has been bestowed upon you. I am only responsible for imparting the knowledge you seek. Even if this leads to some unforeseen circumstances, that is only natural. We cannot prevent the spread of knowledge simply because of fear of future uncertainties." Loki listened in stunned silence, feeling a little bewildered, as if something was amiss. But even more than that, he was filled with admiration for Lin Feng's intellectual realm. When he looked at Lin Feng again, his eyes were filled with reverence. Before, he had only known Lin Feng for his profound knowledge, unknown to others. But today, he realized that Lin Feng's intellectual realm and vision far surpassed everyone else's, even surpassing himself, a god from Asgard. He truly deserves to be China's most renowned scholar. Perhaps only a nation with such rich heritage and time-honored traditions as China could cultivate such an outstanding and great individual. I simply don't know how to thank you enough for your trust and guidance." Loki spoke with tears of gratitude, his expression growing increasingly devout. "Professor, I have one last request, and I hope you'll listen." Lin Feng nodded nonchalantly, saying casually, "Go ahead." Loki's eyes lit up, and he quickly said, "I want to assist you in your work." Lin Feng raised a brow slightly. Surprised. Assisting? Did he mean he wanted to be his assistant? Loki continued mumbling, "I know this may be inappropriate, but I truly admire you. I really want to stay by your side and help you with anything. Anything, as long as I can be of even the slightest help, be of even the slightest value to you, that's enough, and I don't need any compensation. I just want to stay by your side and continue to learn from you." He spoke faster and faster, his tone tinged with panic and pleading. Lin Feng's initial surprise gradually faded with Loki's words. Loki was a fence-sitter, siding with whoever was powerful. If the deaths of Odin and Frigga hadn't shaken him so deeply, he'd probably have continued that fence-sitting lifestyle, constantly traversing the universe, tirelessly paying homage to powerful figures and stirring up trouble. Now, aside from the gods and Buddhas he impersonated, he was the only human being truly powerful, so it was perfectly natural for Loki to want to follow him. And this guy, though a fence-sitter, was truly capable. Perhaps he would be a good choice as his assistant. Lin Feng pondered the matter slowly, already feeling about 70% convinced. But Loki noticed that Lin Feng had remained silent after hearing his words. He couldn't help but think that Lin Feng didn't want him at all, and his heart was in turmoil, his nerves racing. He quickly summoned something and offered it to Lin Feng with both hands. "Professor Lin, if you're willing to take me on as your assistant, I'll give you this cosmic cube." Loki held the cube, gleaming with a deep blue luster, in his hands and presented it to Lin Feng. The space gem within slowly rotated, emanating an infinite mystical power. Lin Feng raised an eyebrow slightly. Loki had indeed invested heavily in even this item, willing to give it away. Just because Loki valued it, and Hydra valued it, didn't mean he valued it as well. He waved his hand casually and smiled. "There's no need for this. Leaving it in my hands would only cause trouble. To be my assistant, you only need to do a few things." Loki listened intently. "First, what is the history of your country and its current social structure? I'm very interested. Write it down as soon as possible. Second, learn some Chinese. You'll be living on Earth, and you'll need to communicate with people in Earth's language." Loki was a clever man. Upon hearing this, he knew Lin Feng was genuinely interested in him and had plans for his future, and he was overjoyed. But Lin Feng didn't accept the cosmic cube, which made him uneasy. He took a few steps forward, insisting on offering it to him. Now that Lin Feng was his immediate superior and had a murky connection to the resurrected primordial god, the cosmic cube was far safer in his hands than in his own. Furthermore, Loki, empathizing with Lin Feng, felt he absolutely refused to do anything without gain. He likely wouldn't be able to provide much value to Professor Lin in the short term, so he could only rely on the cosmic cube to improve Professor Lin Feng's favorability. Lin Feng could see his intentions, and seeing his stubbornness, he accepted the offer, waving his hand for Loki to quickly carry out his instructions. Loki promptly executed, promising Lin Feng, "I will quickly learn Chinese and record everything about Asgard in Chinese." He assumed Lin Feng was hoping to learn more about Asgard through him, excited at the chance to finally pass on his knowledge to Lin Feng. Little did he know, after Lin Feng dismissed him, he gave him no further thought. Instead, he toyed with the cosmic cube, pondering his next move. 149. Chapter 148 Butterfly Wings Fanning the Wind. 149. Chapter 148 Butterfly Wings Fanning the Wind. 2024-09-10 Author, Good Monster. Chapter 148 Butterfly Wings Fanning the Wind. In the Marvel Universe, Thor, Ragnarok follows the events of Avengers 2. However, in Avengers 2, Tony Stark and Bruce Banner used the Mind Stone to develop the Age of Ultron. Now that he possesses the Mind Stone, Ultron cannot exist, and neither can Vision, potentially skipping the entire plot of Avengers 2. If so, the storyline should skip Avengers 2 and go straight to Thor, Ragnarok. This butterfly effect is a bit too much. Will he face Elon next, or Surtur? Either way, Lin Feng is excited. Challenging the unknown is far more exciting than following the beaten path. Playing with the Tesseract presented by Loki and gazing at the space stone within, an idea suddenly crossed his mind. Why not go to Asgard himself? Ragnarok hasn't happened yet, but it's bound to happen anyway. Why not push the progress bar forward myself? Oh, no, it feels like I've forgotten something. Lin Feng frowned slightly, but after thinking it over several times, he couldn't figure out what he'd overlooked. Since he couldn't think of it for now, he decided not to dwell on it. This time, we've gained a lot, and there are many follow-up matters to deal with. Anything I can't think of can be put aside for now and dealt with later. The United States. Pierce clenched his fists, staring at the flashing data on the screen, and let out a long sigh. This Yang Jian is truly formidable, far more powerful than Steve and the others. We can't let China continue to grow like this. We must implement the plan sooner. As long as it succeeds, we'll surely achieve even greater success. The plot Lin Feng had forgotten was Pierce's plan to eliminate the 9 heads in Captain America II. Originally, this wouldn't have happened so soon, but the butterfly effect, fueled by the shock and pressure unleashed by the Chinese gods on the world, swiftly brought the plan's launch forward. Aircraft carrier construction complete, kill list successfully entered, prepare for liftoff. SHIELD had gradually realized the crisis and began secretly operating. However, ordinary American officials and the public remained oblivious to the shift in the situation, reveling in the joy of survival like the rest of the world. Some more far-sighted officials recognized the significant boost Yang Jian's sudden emergence would bring to China's reputation and morale, but they still believed that a war between nations could not be turned around by 1 or 2 superheroes or so-called gods. They also doubted that someone with Yang Jian's power would intervene in a national conflict. Wouldn't that be overkill for a god? Ordinary people, however, gave no such thought, merely awestruck by the sheer force Yang Jian displayed in the skies above Renton. No one realized that this was a turning point in the global situation. The United States' former dominance and unparalleled appeal were gradually fading. Rednecks and teenagers were particularly impressed by Yang Jian's strength. I never thought Chinese heroes could be so powerful. I used to think Iron Man was the limit of human power, but now it seems he's no match for Yang Jian. I heard that in ancient times, China had many more heroes than just Yang Jian. You wonder how their strength compares to Yang Jian. The Chinese heritage is truly remarkable. It was quiet before. But now suddenly someone like Yang Jian has emerged. I wish I could be as powerful as a Chinese hero. Although the United States and China were enemies on a national level, Yang Jian had saved humanity and had become a hero for all of humanity. Therefore, Americans still spoke of him with great enthusiasm, believing him to be their own hero as well. Amidst this widespread discussion, some thoughtful individuals had other ideas in mind. With the destruction of Renton, we don't know how long it will take Eagle Country to recover. During the Zhangjiang incident, nothing happened in China. I don't know if we can immigrate to China. I don't recognize this world anymore. I have a feeling these strange incidents will become more frequent. Can the government protect us? Or is it safer to immigrate to China? That's right. If something happens to people in other countries, Yang Jian may not intervene, but if something happens in China, Yang Jian will definitely intervene. Although the general public only has a partial understanding of what's happening, and even those in power only have a glimpse of it, this little understanding is enough for some wise people to make their own judgments. Safety and food and clothing are humans' primary needs. In today's world, no matter what country, food and clothing are almost no longer a concern. But safety is different. Ever since Tony Stark revealed his superhero identity, the incident has become increasingly bizarre, causing increasing damage and disruption to the daily lives of ordinary citizens. In this situation, the safety that was once taken for granted has suddenly become a luxury. Who could have imagined that the Eagle Nation's capital would one day be reduced to a scorched earth? Yet, it happened just like that, without any warning. A yawning gash ripped open from the sky, wiping out the entire city in a devastating blow. If this happened in Renton one day, it could happen in New York the next. Even the White House wouldn't be surprising. The United States, boasting the world's most advanced weaponry and military industry, once believed itself immune to such threats. But even the most advanced weaponry only worked against humans. How much of an effect could they have against those alienated monsters and dark elves invading from another universe? To deal with them, one had to rely on supernatural powers. And when it came to supernatural powers, one couldn't avoid the gods of China. During the conversation, some voiced dissenting opinions. China has gods, and we have our own superheroes. Tony Stark is still ours. Even if his power couldn't match that of a Chinese god, he still had the entire Stark Industries complex. This suggestion was immediately met with sneers. Even if Tony Stark were still here, his power couldn't compare to that of a Chinese god, let alone one who's gone. This sent shockwaves through the air, and many people, wide-eyed in shock, began to question the man. But the man had little patience. He snorted coldly, "There are 4 astronauts on the Chinese manned spacecraft. Besides the 2 Chinese astronauts, who do you think the other 2 are? They're Tony Stark and Bruce Banner." The relationship between the United States and China might be clear to others, but it's clear to us too. Why would they allow 2 foreigners to participate in such a major space project? 150. Chapter 149 Aircraft Carrier Takes Off. 150. Chapter 149 Aircraft Carrier Takes Off 2024-09. 10 Author, Good Monster Chapter 149 Aircraft carrier takes off what? Those two are Tony Stark and Bruce Banner, really? I didn't look carefully at the time and don't remember what the other two look like. Thinking carefully, it seems that they do look a bit similar. Just play the video of that time and you'll know. As he said that, someone played the video of that time again. This time, they no longer paid attention to the two Chinese astronauts who were talking to the ground, but focused on observing the other two. After careful observation, many people gasped. It seems that they are indeed Tony Stark and Bruce Banner, but how is this possible? Tony Stark actually secretly joined China without telling us. If he's joined China, then why are we still here? That's right. When we encounter those things in the future, weapons won't be enough. We can only rely on superheroes to prevent them. But our superheroes have all fled to China, so who will protect us next time? Many people grew increasingly excited, almost having already decided to start preparing to immigrate to China tomorrow. But some also raised doubts. It doesn't look like Tony Stark, right? Isn't the Stark Industries building still operating in New York? Why would Tony Stark join China? Doesn't he want his vast fortune? A brief silence fell upon these words. Of course, those who planned to flee to China planned to take most of their wealth with them. None of them planned to become penniless in China. How could Tony Stark abandon his assets in the United States and go to China alone? It just didn't make sense to him. Seeing everyone fall silent after his question, the man felt a little proud and continued. Besides those gods, what else in China is stronger than the United States? Those gods won't give Stark any special guidance, and China itself can't possibly offer Stark more benefits than the United States. Why would he defect to China? Everyone thought this made sense. Tony Stark was a superhero revered by Americans. He already had Stark Industries in the United States, with no shortage of wealth or power. What better terms could China offer him than the United States? At that moment, someone suddenly spoke up in the silent crowd. Don't forget, China has. Professor Lin Feng. The name stirred 1,000 waves, rippling through everyone's hearts. Indeed, Tony Stark didn't care for money or power, nor did he need status or position, nor did he have the same intense need for security as ordinary people. All he needed was the latest science and technology. The previous broadcast had already made it known to the world that Professor Lin Feng was the key to China's lunar landing plan, a name specifically mentioned by the sleeping god Yang Jian upon waking from his sleep within the moon. He must have many secrets unknown to others, and he must also hold many keys to rapidly advancing technology. With this in mind, it's no surprise that Tony Stark would defect to China. Not to mention him, which leader in the world wouldn't want Professor Lin Feng? Hadn't they previously fought over Lin Feng, leading to a small-scale firefight between agents from various countries? Even if China's hard power is slightly inferior to that of the United States, they have Professor Lin Feng. As long as they have Professor Lin Feng, catching up with the United States will be a piece of cake. Thinking of this, everyone strengthened their resolve. The voice that had called out Lin Feng's name continued slowly. Although the gods can protect humanity, they are still gods and humans are different. We can't always rely on them. Among humans, only Professor Lin Feng can we rely on. Only he can bridge the gap between humans and gods, allowing humanity to continue to thrive peacefully. During the Linton incident, before Yang Jian intervened, wasn't it Professor Lin Feng who managed to delay the disaster and mitigate its impact? That's right, someone immediately chimed in. With Lin Feng, China is far more powerful than all of America's military and industrial might, and its future is far brighter. I think this matter can't be delayed. Once the decision is made, we must immediately prepare for immigration. The longer we delay, the more the government will hinder immigration. We better act quickly, or we might not even be able to reach China. The crowd erupted in heated discussion, no one noticing that the person who had brought the conversation to Lin Feng had quietly vanished. Walking down the streets of New York, Loki smiled. People's hearts are so easily soured, a few simple words can do the trick. Besides, he hadn't lied, everything he just said to those people was the truth. Only Professor Lin Feng could enable humanity to rise, to progress quickly enough to rival other parallel universes. He was indeed intentionally boosting Lin Feng's reputation and status, but this was also beneficial for all of humanity. Now that he had become Professor Lin Feng's assistant, he must spare no effort to help him gain greater social prestige and influence, taming others into dogs who wouldn't dare disobey Professor Lin Feng, forcing them to abandon their evil intentions and diligently follow his guidance, so that Earth could rise as quickly as possible. Only when Earth and humanity rose would he gain more influence, and Professor Lin Feng would trust him even more. Suddenly, something flashed across the sky, interrupting Loki's thoughts. He looked up in surprise. This was. Loki narrowed his eyes slightly, making out the outlines. 3 massive aircraft carriers. Loki wasn't the only one who saw it. Everyone passing through the streets of Washington heard the noise and saw the 3 aircraft carriers streak through the air, their shadows casting a shadow over them and then swiftly passing by. They remembered these things. They were the aircraft that had smashed into the Statue of Liberty, but why were they here now? People stared in stunned silence, unaware of the impending danger. Only Loki found this situation particularly suspicious, a sense of alarm rising within him. He immediately hid, hiding among the crowd, and vanished in an instant. Unbeknownst to him, the person standing next to him was Steve Rogers. Steve Rogers was on the phone, his attention drawn to the 3 aircraft carriers in the sky, and he didn't notice the person beside him vanish in an instant. He frowned and picked up the intercom again. "Nick Fury, did you see those 3 things in the sky?" Child hasn't responded yet. Nick Fury's voice was almost frantic. "Fuck. Of course I saw them. But I don't know what's going on. Director Pierce should be there, but I can't get through to him. Captain, be careful. Maybe there's something else going on." 266. Chapter 265 Defeat Thanos. 265, The Defeat of Thanos, 2024-12-07, Author, Good Monster. At this moment, Lin Feng still sat on the ground, still recovering from the exhaustion of casting the future vision. They knew that allowing time to flow and peering into the future came at a heavy price. They had done their utmost to gain Captain America's trust, but even so, he remained skeptical, leaving them feeling deeply frustrated. Thor's impatience nearly led him to lose control in an attempt to attack Captain America. At that moment, Lin Feng slowly awoke. He looked exhausted, yet remained resolute. "I suspect you've already largely believed it. Whether you believe it or not, the facts are before you. If you don't want to die, cooperate with us. We've already expended considerable energy saving you, and time is not something you can easily manipulate," he added. "We can save you once, but not a second time. There are so many superheroes, and Thanos could strike at someone else at any moment. We can't devote all our energy to you." Captain America wavered. The future he had seen seemed too real, and it contained many hidden secrets. Since they knew all this, perhaps their words were true. So, he agreed to cooperate and brought the 3 back home. However, he was conflicted by the demands made by Rhodes and Thor. They demanded that he remain with the 3 at all times, in case Thanos attacked. Captain America, a man of freedom, couldn't let such a thing constrain him. Moreover, he had an appointment with Pepper Potts. He retorted, "Thanos may be powerful, but I'm not necessarily his match. I've just been injected with a genetic drug, and my strength is at its peak. Even if I'm defeated, I can easily escape." Lin Feng couldn't help but shake his head and smile bitterly. Captain America truly was a fearless young man. Even in his prime, he was no match for Thanos. Now, despite having received the genetic drug, the power hadn't yet been fully absorbed. Even they couldn't match him, let alone the immensely powerful Thanos. Thor firmly opposed Captain America's departure at this moment, believing that the future was predetermined and there was no need to worry too much. However, Captain America ignored his advice and instead sneered, "You're too cowardly. Thanos alone has scared you out of your wits. I don't think he's anything more than that. Otherwise, why hasn't he appeared yet? I don't need your protection. Perhaps I can defeat him single-handedly." Rod's heart sank after hearing this. He knew Captain America had no idea of true power, and such blind confidence could lead to serious trouble. Thor was furious. The 3 of them had done so much for him, only to be mocked. In a rage, he raised his massive hammer and struck Captain America. Seeing this, Captain America's fury flared within him. Undeterred, he used his superpowers to block Thor's attack. Despite Thor's immense strength, far surpassing that of Captain America, who had just been injected with a genetic drug, Captain America fought back fiercely. After several rounds, Captain America realized he was outmatched and decided to retreat. Suspecting these men had ulterior motives in approaching him, he refused to fall prey to a trap. So, he quietly moved toward the door, preparing to flee. Rhodes, sensing his intention, was about to intervene, but Lin Feng held him back, signaling him not to act rashly. Sure enough, as Thor swung his hammer again. Captain America took advantage of the momentum and bolted out the door, escaping at a rapid speed. While Thor was powerful, he lacked the speed advantage, and could only watch helplessly as Captain America retreated. Thor was extremely dissatisfied with this. He scolded Lin Feng and Rhodes, "Are you here just to watch the fun? Why didn't you help us when we were fighting? Why didn't you stop him when he escaped? If he left alone, Thanos could find him at any moment. How dangerous would that be?" Rhodes also looked at Lin Feng, confused by his actions. Lin Feng sighed and explained, "Don't you see? He doesn't trust us at all. Besides, he's just awakened his powers, and his confidence is inflated. He won't change unless he experiences some hardship. Let him face Thanos, and we'll be watching from the side. It won't be a big problem." Rhodes nodded in understanding, but worried, "We don't know when Thanos will strike. If we miss, Captain America will be in danger." Lin Feng waved his hand to reassure him, saying he had a way to predict Thanos' move. With that, the image of an elderly man with a white beard and a crutch suddenly appeared behind him. 3 flowers appeared on his head, and a person sat on each flower. The old man opened his eyes slightly, tapped the ground with his cane, and the world suddenly stopped. Lin Feng saw a long river of time slowly flowing. He searched carefully and finally found Thanos' trace. He then emerged from this state, panting as he told Rhodes and Thor, "We must expedite our actions. Thanos will strike tonight. We need to prepare, or Captain America will be in grave danger." Rhodes and Thor nodded in agreement and immediately began searching for Captain America's location, planning to provide support that night while also allowing him to face Thanos alone and learn a lesson. After traveling for a while, the 3 of them finally arrived at a beach. They vaguely spotted Captain America sitting by the sea, braving the cold wind, clutching a bottle of wine, like a heartbroken man. Thor observed him with a wave of displeasure. "We've been running around for him, finally finding him, and here he is, drowning his sorrows in alcohol. I really want to go over there and give him a beating. What do you think?" "When should we go?" Thor said angrily. Lin Feng shook his head gently and dissuaded him, saying, "If we go there now, given his temper, he'll definitely flee. Finding him then will be incredibly difficult. We promised to teach him a lesson, and we believe Thanos will appear soon. Then, let him suffer a bitter lesson, and we'll intervene in the crucial moment." Rhodes and Thor nodded in agreement, concealing their presence and waiting quietly. Among the 3 of them, Lin Feng had quietly become the leader. His strength far surpassed the others, and his wisdom was unparalleled. Many decisions came from him. Rhodes and Thor had complete faith in him and naturally followed his orders. Captain America sat alone by the sea, drowning his sorrows in wine. The experiences of the past 2 days had been like a dream, unbelievable, and difficult for him to accept. He could only drink to drown his sorrows and brood in solitude. Suddenly, he felt a powerful pressure coming from the front, and a hole appeared in space, like a passage. Then, a figure emerged from it, catching Captain America's attention. He sensed a terrifying power in this stranger, who seemed to match the Thanos he remembered. So, he tentatively asked, "Are you Thanos?" Thanos had just arrived and was surprised to see Captain America recognize him. Logically, Captain America should have known nothing about him at this point. "Oh? You've heard of me? That's interesting," Thanos responded curiously. Captain America realized Thanos was targeting him, his drunken streak instantly dispelled, and he launched a fierce attack at Thanos. However, Thanos shrugged him off. Even at his peak, Captain America showed no fear, let alone this immature foe. Thanos easily neutralized Captain America's attack, rendering all his efforts in vain. He said dismissively, "If I'm not mistaken, you just used the genetic potion? With that little skill, do you think I'd personally attack you?" How disappointing. Captain America was stunned. He had launched an all-out attack, only to be so easily neutralized by Thanos. Only then did he truly realize Thanos' formidable power and finally believe the warnings of the 3 men. However, it was too late to seek their help, and he could only struggle on. Thanos looked at the frail Captain America before him, unable to imagine him as a grown man. So, he began to toy with Captain America like a cat and mouse. Captain America, seeing that Thanos, far superior to him, was not eager to defeat him, but instead toyed with him, was furious. He fought back with all his might, but still could not inflict the slightest harm on Thanos. By the time Thanos had tired of playing with him and was about to strike, Captain America was exhausted. Knowing he could not withstand Thanos' fatal blow, He was filled with despair. He regretted his willfulness and feared his life would end at that moment. However, at that moment, a flash of light appeared, and he did not feel the pain he had expected. Puzzled, he opened his eyes and saw Lin Feng and the other two standing before him. "Hey, stop pretending to be dead. Come help," Lin Feng's voice rang out. At the crucial moment, Lin Feng had rushed forward and blocked the fatal blow for him. When Thanos saw Lin Feng and the other two had followed him, he was enraged. He had never expected them to be so persistent. These three were like a shadow, impossible to shake off. He had thought that by using his special abilities to travel here, he could capture them before they could grow stronger. However, they had tracked him down, making his situation even more challenging. However, he didn't take them seriously. After all, he had defeated them once before and was confident he could do it again. He didn't sense the power of the space stone from them. This meant they had likely moved it elsewhere. This thought infuriated him even more. If it weren't for these three, he would have already succeeded. This pesky creature had come to ruin his plans again. Thanos no longer held back and launched a fierce attack on the three. Lin Feng and the other two, with Lin Feng at their head, quickly launched a counterattack. Knowing that Lin Feng was the strongest, they followed closely behind, coordinating the attack. Lin Feng took the lead, drawing the enemy's attention, while Rhodes and Thor provided support. Even so, Thanos' strength proved too great. After several rounds, they realized they were no match for him. Then, they noticed Captain America, who lay dying nearby. At that moment, Lin Feng suddenly remembered the power he had acquired from the Jade Emperor. He unleashed it without hesitation, and instantly, a powerful pressure permeated the entire space, bearing down on Thanos. This pressure made Thanos feel extremely uncomfortable, as if he were being squeezed by space. He was startled. Could it be that Lin Feng had mastered the power of space? If so, he would be hard-pressed. They had no concept of pressure. Even Rhodes and Thor, standing behind Lin Feng, were shocked by the force. However, Lin Feng always managed to surprise them. It wasn't uncommon. While they could accept this fact, Thanos found it difficult to accept. He realized that if he remained there, he would likely fail. After all, Lin Feng's power had grown too strangely. He had never felt such immense pressure in their previous encounter. They hadn't expected Lin Feng to have grown so formidable in such a short time. Could such a powerful force be anything other than spatial force? He knew he would be at risk if he didn't evacuate immediately. So, he chose to retreat temporarily, believing he wouldn't suffer a loss in the face of adversity. Besides, Captain America had already been injured, so if he had the chance, he could return to finish him off. Seeing Thanos leave, the three breathed a sigh of relief. A head-on confrontation would have been difficult for them to defeat. More importantly, any further delay would have cost Captain America his life. While Captain America's recent behavior had displeased them, even tempting them to not rescue him, he was, after all, their future comrade. He had simply failed to recognize his own strength, leading to his defeat at the hands of Thanos and his severe injuries. Their mission was to rescue him, so they could fight against those ambitious individuals together. They lifted Captain America and prepared to take him home first. Thor was the most distressed. Captain America had previously doubted his motives, which had infuriated him. The two had even engaged in a brawl, and now they were determined to rescue him. Thor wasn't narrow-minded, just short-tempered. But the problem was, someone had to carry Captain America back. After Lin Feng and Rhodes discussed it, they decided to let Thor do it. Though reluctant, Thor had complete faith in Lin Feng. Lin Feng was not only formidable, but also possessed leadership skills. This time, facing Thanos, he clearly felt that Lin Feng's strength had increased significantly. Although he didn't know the reason, he chose to trust Lin Feng's judgment. When Lin Feng, Rhodes, and Thor returned to Captain America's home, his condition was critical. Knowing there was no time to delay, Rhodes immediately activated the sophisticated computer he had brought from the future and quickly conducted a comprehensive examination of Captain America's injuries. The results were alarming. Captain America's injuries were far more severe than he had imagined. The fierce battle with Thanos had left him severely injured, and his abilities hadn't yet fully awakened, leaving his physical condition and strength at a nascent stage. Consequently, he felt as if his entire strength was gradually disintegrating. Rhodes could only rely on advanced technology to provide initial treatment, at least temporarily halting the progression of his injuries. Captain America slowly regained consciousness soon after. Although he had no memory of what happened next, he could sense what was happening outside, and his heart was filled with shame and gratitude. He had never imagined that the people he had previously doubted would be the ones who saved him. Their assistance in this critical moment deeply moved him and completely changed his view of them. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelis. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. 152. Chapter 151 Exchange, Roaring Sky Dog. 152. Chapter 151 Exchange, Roaring Sky Dog 2024-09-10 Author, Good Monster. Chapter 151 Exchange, Roaring Sky Dog. Pierce immediately pulled up the surveillance footage. It showed Steve Rogers, riding a heavy motorcycle, bursting through the tightly closed mechanical door and into SHIELD. Pierce frowned. Damn. How did he get here so quickly? Steve Rogers dismounted, panting. To reach SHIELD as quickly as possible, he'd driven almost straight ahead, barely turning or stopping. Even though it was a newly purchased motorcycle, he'd been pushing it to its breaking point for just a few minutes. Many inside SHIELD were startled by his sudden intrusion, turning to examine him in confusion. Steve Rogers asked, "Where's Pierce?" Just then, Pierce's voice suddenly rang out over the radio. "Agents, attention. Steve Rogers has been corrupted by the Dark Elves in Renton. All agents in the Bureau, mobilize, whatever means, he must be killed here." Upon hearing these words, the agents immediately drew their weapons and surrounded Steve Rogers from all sides. Although Steve Rogers didn't look like he'd been corrupted, it was better to be safe than sorry. Steve Rogers had fought Malekith before, and the possibility of him being transformed during the encounter was very high. Meanwhile, Lin Feng, far away in the Chinese capital, took in everything. His lips curled slightly as he watched the fight with amusement. I wonder how long those American officials can hold out. Don't request too soon. It would be a shame not to see more of this wonderful show. Lin Feng had no fondness for the United States. Even if Hydra sank the entire North American continent, it wouldn't matter to him. The destruction of the United States would only provide Lin Feng with a better stage to perform. Moreover, China is only a breath away from challenging the United States' hegemony. This breath is the image of authority that the United States has cultivated over a century of global leadership. Without this image, it will be difficult to achieve the rapid decline of the United States. Now, a sudden change has arrived. Hydra will tear off the United States' veil, exposing its inability to resist absolute power to the world. This will undoubtedly shatter the image of the United States as invincible. Once this momentum is shattered, even if its hard power remains largely intact, the United States will never regain its former dominance. Conversely, China is rising. Whether it is impersonating gods or participating in various activities in its own capacity, it has demonstrated to the world how China can handle such events with ease. As one rises and the other falls, the United States is destined to be toppled from its throne as the sole superpower. Most importantly, the aliens have invaded twice in a short period of time, and in full view of the public. Even the least well-informed elders knew that aliens did exist, and that their presence would inevitably pose a frequent threat to the safety of Earth's inhabitants. This situation undoubtedly strengthened China's advantage in challenging the United States' position. Lin Feng pondered this, slowly withdrawing his gaze from the window. The midday sun was intense, casting a slit of light through the pristine white curtains onto the floor. The wind blew the curtains up and down, causing the streak of light to grow and shrink, but no matter how large or small, it never disappeared. This was a perfect reflection of the crisis facing the United States right now. Any clear-headed American officials would have realized that they had been thoroughly infiltrated, that self-rescue was impossible, and that they could only turn to China, to Lin Feng. But how many clear-headed American officials still had? Lin Feng gently sipped his Baluojan tea, his thoughts shifting away from the United States. Instead, he began to wonder why the system hadn't yet processed his reward. Almost a day had passed, and no system notification had sounded. In a previous, similar incident in Hong Kong, the system had processed a payment immediately. But upon closer inspection, it wasn't particularly surprising. While the flow of events was similar, the previous one wasn't, unlike the London event, broadcast live worldwide from start to finish. Furthermore, He had consciously controlled Tathagata's abilities, minimizing exposure to too many people. This time, however, was drastically different. From beginning to end, every detail was meticulously orchestrated. In just a few hours, Yang Jian's personality, image, and abilities were deeply ingrained in the minds of everyone. As the dark clouds of doom loomed, humanity was on the verge of extinction. He suddenly appeared, changing fate with a single blow. Young and old, regardless of whether they still harbored a heroic aspiration, that single blow was certain to capture their hearts. Even now, online opinion in China and abroad is dominated by the name Yang Jian, demonstrating that people have yet to recover from the shock of that blow. Consequently, the shock factor is still rapidly rising. The slow processing of the system is entirely understandable. Just as he was thinking, a familiar notification chimed in. Lin Feng's brows raised slightly, and his smile deepened. Speak of the devil, and here you are, ding. Congratulations, system, for completing the role-playing mission. Mission rating, SS plus shock value rating, SSS plus congratulations, master, on receiving Erlang Shen points. 2,500,000, congratulations, director, on receiving the mission reward of shock value. 450 million, seeing this shock value, Lin Feng was shocked. He'd previously given a shock value of 5 million, which he'd thought was the maximum, but he hadn't expected it to reach 9 figures this time. And that was just the shock value awarded by the system. He still had a steady stream of additional shock value flowing in. At this rate, he could practically buy out the entire system mall. And with this shock value, he's not far from purchasing a second-level Tathagata authority. That's Tathagata Buda. Even a second-level role-playing authority is enough to dominate the Marvel world and rule for eternity. Just thinking about it makes him excited. Despite his slight excitement, Feng couldn't hide his confusion. Although the shock value awarded this time was very generous, why is the role-playing mission rating only SS+? There's nothing wrong with my arrangement. From the moment I appeared, there was no obvious deviation from Yang Jian. There were even several times when I reached a state of mind that was one with Yang Jian. What exactly is the difference? Lin Feng rested his chin on his hand, thinking for a moment. Suddenly, he heard the faint sound of a dog barking outside. Looking out the window, he saw a young woman walking a large white samoyed. Lin Feng's mind suddenly became clear, and a light bulb lit up in his mind. He immediately opened them all and scrolled through the pages of redemption items. Finally, his finger stopped on the one he wanted. Roaring Sky Dog, 300,000 shock value. 267. Chapter 266 Absorbing New Energy. 267. Chapter 266, Absorbing New Energy, 2024-12-08, Author, Good Monster. At this moment, Lin Feng pondered to himself that if Captain America continued like this, his strength would be far from restored, and the crisis was imminent. So, he decided to take action. He ordered Rhodes and Thor to remove all the wires from Captain America's body and lay him flat on the bed. Although surprised, they held Lin Feng in high esteem, so they obeyed. After being laid to the bed, Captain America looked bewildered, yet he remained trusting of the men. Then, Lin Feng pulled out a green object covered in inscriptions from his bosom. No one knew what it was, except Lin Feng, who understood it to be a relic of the Shannon clan, possessing miraculous healing powers. He placed it beside Captain America, and a green light slowly merged into his body. His injuries began to heal at a noticeable rate. Soon, Captain America felt completely healed, and his health was even stronger than before. He tried to stand, touching the injured area, filled with amazement. Rhodes, after another test, confirmed that Captain America's injuries had fully healed, and he was equally astonished. They were curious about Lin Feng's methods, but Lin Feng simply smiled and remained silent. Recalling Lin Feng's fierce battle with Thanos, everyone was even more shocked. Lin Feng's strength was so great that it seemed only natural that he could produce such a treasure. Everyone has secrets. This might be Lin Feng's unique skill. Moreover, he hailed from a mysterious ancient Eastern nation, where countless unknown powers lay hidden, unknown to all. Thor, a straightforward person, couldn't help but complain that Lin Feng's prodigious strength made them seem useless. Lin Feng simply smiled and didn't refute. He knew these people still had room to grow, and once they reached maturity, they would be a force to be reckoned with. Captain America and Thor seemed to be a natural rival. Soon, the two began arguing again. Rhodes, feeling helpless, allowed them to spar. He knew that the two men had similar personalities, and their quarrels were merely a way of communicating, as long as they didn't damage the relationship. After a while, everyone gathered again to discuss their next plan. Captain America, after this incident, had deeply realized the disparity in power between those of similar abilities. He knew that, alone, he was no match for a power like Thanos. Even in his unconscious state, he could still feel the shockwaves of the three men's battle with Thanos. He had once harbored resentment towards these men, but now, those thoughts had vanished. He was particularly impressed by the immense strength of the Oriental man named Lin Feng. Captain America himself offered no resistance to Thanos, while Lin Feng, with a single, uncanny power, had driven him back. This was truly remarkable. Therefore, he knew that to overcome this crisis, he would need the help of these men. Despite having previously offended them due to a misunderstanding, they had put aside past grudges and offered him a helping hand in his time of need. Thinking of this, Captain America's resentment vanished, and he gladly accepted their offer. So, the group settled into Captain America's house, planning to wait out the storm or discover Thanos' whereabouts before making any further plans. Their attention once again focused on Lin Feng. Previously, Lin Feng had successfully predicted Thanos' arrival using the river chart and the Luoshu, astonishing everyone present. They knew such incredible power was beyond their reach, even feeling it smacked of cheating. If Lin Feng unleashed his full power, the enemy would have no chance of victory. So, they tentatively asked Lin Feng if he could predict Thanos' current location again. If Thanos didn't return, they could leave in peace. However, Lin Feng shook his head, explaining that this technique was extremely energy-consuming, having already expended considerable energy, and that it would be difficult to perform again in the short term. In reality, it wasn't that Lin Feng couldn't use this ability, but rather that he feared the power of cause and effect. In the East, cause and effect is a matter of metaphysics, and practitioners hold it in deep secrecy. Although Lin Feng didn't know he had transcended cause and effect, he still feared punishment for revealing the secret, so he hesitated to use it. Meanwhile, Thor and Captain America's relationship was growing harmonious, a fact Lin Feng found heartening. Captain America, though recovered from his injuries, still needed to recover physically, so he prepared to rest. Thor and Rhodes, brimming with energy, decided to play a game to pass the time. Lin Feng, on the other hand, was different. He knew his strength, despite its improvement, was still insufficient against Thanos. So, he closed his eyes and concentrated, practicing his cultivation techniques, continuously improving his cultivation. Suddenly, a system notification sounded. He opened the task interface and discovered a quest for the Poseidon fragment. Lin Feng was astonished. He had never expected to encounter such a treasure on this trip. The energy fragment of Poseidon, the god of the sea, held immense power. While it differed from his own cultivation system, the path to cultivation was similar, and this fragment would undoubtedly be a significant aid to him. If he could obtain it, combined with his own strength, perhaps the next time he faced Thanos, he wouldn't need the Jade Emperor's power to scare him off, but would instead possess the strength to defeat him. Upon learning of the Poseidon energy fragment, Lin Feng knew he had to leave this place temporarily. However, the thought of the impending challenge filled him with conflict. He knew that if he left, with his current strength, he would be unable to withstand Thanos' threat. Unable to think of a better solution, Lin Feng decided to go out for a walk, hoping inspiration would strike and a solution might emerge. Meanwhile, the others were still awake, and seeing him emerge from his room, they assumed some emergency had occurred and followed him out. Seeing their confusion, Lin Feng explained that he had sensed something vital in this world, and that if he could obtain it, his strength would be greatly enhanced. Everyone was stunned. They knew Lin Feng's strength was already formidable, and if he could further enhance it, the threat of Thanos might be easily overcome. However, Lin Feng also expressed his concern. If he left and Thanos attacked, they would be overwhelmed. But Rhodes reassured him, saying that according to their judgment, Thanos wouldn't appear for a while. If they acted quickly, they might be able to find the energy fragment while Lin Feng was away and strengthen their strength. But everyone also understood that Lin Feng was their backbone. The only one capable of confronting Thanos head-on. If he left, and something were to happen to him, it would be a huge loss for them. Furthermore, Lin Feng was unfamiliar with this era, and searching alone would be like looking for a needle in a haystack. So, Rhodes suggested, I'm familiar with this place, and my technology allows for precise location. Why don't we go together? Early in, early out, The others agreed, believing this was the best of both worlds. Lin Feng didn't refuse, knowing it was the best option. The two of them left, and Lin Feng, relying on his sensory abilities and the system's guidance, began searching the vast world. After some searching, they finally sensed a familiar force in a museum. Lin Feng was certain that the object he was looking for lay within. In the dead of night, they quietly entered and began their search. Deep within the museum, Lin Feng was captivated by a painting. It depicted a ship, and the inhabitants aboard held tridents, their gazes piercing. While others might not notice anything unusual, Lin Feng could clearly sense the eerie energy flowing through the painting. He immediately knew that what he was looking for lay within it. He shared his discovery with Rhodes. Although surprised, out of trust in Lin Feng, Rhodes unhesitatingly took out his instruments. They could have simply used brute force to destroy the protective structures, but since Lin Feng only wanted the energy fragments on the painting, there was no need for unnecessary damage. So, Rhodes used his technological prowess to easily crack the museum's security system. Lin Feng carefully removed the painting and, through the system's sensing, successfully extracted a blue energy fragment from it. He knew it was the energy fragment of Poseidon, the god of the sea, that he had longed for. Holding the energy fragment tightly in his hand, Lin Feng restored everything to its original state, ensuring no traces were left. Then, they quietly left the museum and began their journey home. When they left, they didn't stop, but went straight to Captain America's house. Captain America and Thor were surprised to see them return so quickly. They asked if they had found the object. At this moment, Lin Yu opened his hand, took out the blue fragment, and showed it to the people present. They looked at the blue fragment in his hand and didn't see anything unusual. Could this object actually boost his strength? They couldn't sense anything from the fragment. At this point, Lin Yu said to them, "You guys defend this place for a while. I need to retreat for a while to absorb the power of this object. Once I've absorbed all of it, with my current strength, I should be able to fight Thanos on equal terms, or even overpower him." These people were puzzled. Hadn't Lin Yu already defeated Thanos before? Why was he saying he wasn't his match now? Seeing the puzzled expressions, Lin Yu quickly explained the situation. He told them that Thanos had only left because he feared being annihilated by him, given his mastery of special abilities. In reality, the power he possessed wouldn't pose much threat to him. If he had insisted on staying, with his current strength, he might not have been able to defeat him. Even if he did, he would have suffered serious injuries. These people were shocked. They hadn't expected this to happen, but from what he said, once he absorbed the energy of the blue fragment, he would be able to defeat that guy. So, these people promised to stay home and not go anywhere else, waiting for him to absorb all the power within. Lin Yu nodded and returned to his room. Once there, he immediately connected with his system's space. Its system created a space perfect for absorbing the energy fragment of Poseidon. When he opened his eyes, he found himself facing the vast ocean. He could sense the immense power within it. Perhaps, in this environment, he could further develop the power of this object. He breathed a sigh of relief and tossed the blue fragment in his hand. It formed a phantom in midair. He sensed a powerful force from the phantom. He knew for sure that this phantom must be Poseidon. But he didn't have time to think about that at the moment. This power, drawn from various machines and the entire ocean, he immediately activated his cultivation techniques, preparing to absorb this power. Immediately, the power of the entire world surged towards him. Lin Yu immediately felt his power growing, healing his injuries and strengthening his physique. He maintained this movement, and a fluctuating energy emanated from his room, making the three men outside look extremely alert. Knowing the crucial importance of this situation to Lin Yu, they couldn't disturb him at all costs, remaining quietly on guard outside. After a long moment, Yi Fang felt his power had been fully absorbed. Meanwhile, the phantom grew larger and larger, seemingly ready to vanish at any moment. Finally, when he opened his eyes, an immense power surged from him. He could sense the power of every water molecule in the ocean, absorbing it. It was as if he had mastered the laws of water. He even mastered numerous applications of water in his mind, even turning it into ice for attack. At this moment, an image flashed through his mind, the scene from the Phantom's battle. He was utterly astonished. He hadn't expected this fragment of Poseidon's energy to contain his battle experience. This combat experience was extremely necessary for him. He could sense that he possessed various magical powers, but his application was still at a very low level. This was a perfect opportunity for him to improve his combat experience. He was slowly digesting this combat experience, and he could sense that after absorbing this power, his combat effectiveness would be significantly improved. At that time, he would no longer be afraid of Thanos. 154. Chapter 153 Killing Feast. 154. Chapter 153, Killing Feast 2024-09-10 Author, Good Monster Chapter 153, Killing Feast Woof, woof woof. It was the same barking sound as before, but louder and closer, seemingly barking right next to Pierce's ear. For a moment, Pierce lost even his own voice, only the frightened, ringing sound of his ears. This resounding sound also reached every other Hydra leader through the communication equipment. Despite the crackling sound of electricity, the loud barking was like thunder. Some people holding the communication equipment were startled and almost lost their grip, causing the equipment to fall to the ground. The sound was truly indescribable. It sounded like a dog's bark, but also like the roar of some ancient beast. It contained a majestic power that filled every person with a hidden conscience with fear and terrified. The chattering paused for a moment, their expressions frozen, bewildered by the overwhelming roar. After this moment of bewilderment, someone slowly began to speak. Oh my God, what the hell was that sound? Is it a dog barking? How could a dog bark so loud? Pierce, what on earth is going on over there? Pierce didn't have the energy to answer their questions. The others had only heard the remnant of the barking through their communications, but he himself was directly under the scourge of the barking. He even felt as if the terrifying roar came from directly above him. Even when he looked up, he saw nothing. In his utter terror, he had a terrifying vision, a huge hound, its bloody maw gaping in the sky above him. The stinking salt water from its mouth seemed to drip onto his forehead. The other leaders continued to chatter over the communicator. Don't press the button yet. You're right, this is very strange. We need to figure it out before we forget about the assassination plan. Have your agents investigate the situation first, but Pierce, in his utter panic and hallucinations, could no longer hear the words on the pager. He stared blankly at the sky, closing his eyes tightly and then opening them again. The hallucinations temporarily disappeared, but soon, subtle changes in the light brought back new ones. The ringing in his ears rose and fell like waves, so sharp that it felt like a needle piercing his brain. Pierce froze. And at that moment, he clearly felt a cold wind brushing against him, and he shuddered involuntarily. Only then did he realize that the sky had suddenly turned an icy iron gray. Layers of dark clouds piled together, so gloomy that it seemed to drip ink. No matter how he opened and closed his eyes, the scene did not disappear. It was not an illusion, it was real. Pierce watched in horror as the dark clouds transformed into black clouds. A scene similar to the one in Renton unfolded once again, evoking his deepest fears. What the hell is going on? He muttered to himself, slumping back into his chair. He instinctively tried to steady himself against the center console. As he did so, his palm landed on the button. Beep, scan complete, attack command confirmed, preparing for attack, fire commences in 3 seconds, 3, 2, 1, fire commences. 3 flying aircraft carriers rattled, revealing countless gun barrels and cannons. Then, gleaming silver assassination weapons erupted from their barrels and cannons, flying along their designated routes across the United States. Initially, everyone in Washington, D.C., had heard the strange barking of dogs. While not as horrified as Pierce, they were all equally shocked. Then, they discovered something even stranger. Dogs across Washington, D.C., both domestic and stray, simultaneously burst out of their hiding places, either standing in front of their homes or wandering the streets, their heads raised to the sky, howling like wolves at the moon, bellowing at the top of their lungs. Some dog walkers, noticing the rapidly darkening sky and thinking it was about to rain, rushed home with their dogs. Unexpectedly, the dogs, suddenly excited, broke free from their leashes and bolted, impossible to catch. When they finally caught up, they found them squatting respectfully, barking a few times before lowering themselves again, as if to greet their owners. What's going on? Everyone wondered, contacting their veterinarians to see if something was wrong with their dogs. But they soon discovered this wasn't an isolated case. Even dogs receiving treatment at veterinary hospitals were being forcibly awakened from their anesthetics by the inexplicable call, barking furiously at the sky. It was like a pilgrimage, like welcoming the king of their tribe. The strangeness of these dogs quickly became a hot topic of discussion. But before the topic could even become a hot topic online, another strange change suddenly occurred. The sky was already filled with thick black clouds, but no lightning flashed from the clouds. Instead, at this moment, a spark of light flashed. Puff, 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 puff. Many small sounds of breaking wind echoed in succession, continuous and dense. People could hear these sounds, but they could not see the objects making them. They looked around in confusion and were horrified to see the people around them collapse to the ground without any warning. A sniff of their breath revealed that they were dead. The survivors fell to the ground in horror, stepping back several steps, their pupils trembling as they watched the pool of blood spread out from under the bodies of the deceased. The next moment, another person nearby was silently snatched away, their life fading faster than their blood. Their eyes were already silent, only warm blood gushing out, leaving a crimson trail on the ground. This hellish scene terrified the survivors, and they frantically sought cover. But it was futile. Hydra used biological targeting, and even if those targeted simply hid in the basement, they would still be robbed of their trust by the weapons. Many died with the grievances, many fled in terror, and the entire United States was thrown into chaos. In the Oval Office of the White House, the president, his hair disheveled and bloodshot, pounded the table and yelled for his secretary. "What the hell is going on? Someone come quickly." Before he could finish his words, a small, sharp weapon pierced his chest, silencing his voice and causing him to collapse limply from his chair. However, even as the president, his death could not attract anyone's attention. 268. Chapter 267 Thanos Returns. 268, Thanos Returns 2024-12-09 Author, Gwegwe Monster. Meanwhile, in a dimly lit room, a figure silently healed his wounds. Though he had only suffered minor injuries in his clash with Lin Feng, he couldn't let it go. After all, Lin Feng possessed the power of space. How could his attack be underestimated? He repeatedly checked his body, only feeling slightly relieved after confirming he was fine. Recalling the attack, he felt a growing suspicion that it might not have been a true special attack. If it had been the power of space, he would have had no chance of escaping. He had personally experienced the ruthlessness and despair of a special attack. It was an irresistible force. If Lin Feng truly possessed that kind of power, he would have been wiped out long ago. At this thought, a surge of rage welled up within him. Now it was clear that the attack was merely Lin Feng's own strength. In his original world, those opponents were equally formidable and would undoubtedly cause him considerable trouble. But in this world, they were still immature, presenting him with a golden opportunity for revenge. He quickly tracked down the men's hiding places. Meanwhile, Captain America and three others were waiting in Lin Feng's retreat, vigilantly observing their surroundings. Suddenly, a powerful aura approached, and their hearts raced, wondering if it was Thanos returning. Their suspicions were quickly confirmed. Thanos had indeed arrived. They gazed at Lin Feng in retreat, knowing they couldn't afford to lose at this moment. They had to stop Thanos' interference. So, the three stepped forward and attempted to stop Thanos. Thanos was surprised. He looked around, seeing only the three, but no sign of Lin Feng. Then, he sensed a strange energy fluctuation emanating from the room, further fueling his curiosity and a desire to investigate. However, the three men proved to be a stumbling block, infuriating him. Thanos, unfazed by their strength, easily defeated them. Just as he was about to take further action, a powerful energy surge erupted from the room, knocking him back. Lin Feng emerged. Captain America and the other three breathed a sigh of relief. If Lin Feng had appeared any later, they might have been unable to hold out. Thanos saw Lin Feng, his fury boiling. He had been tricked by Lin Feng last time, and this time he would not be fooled again. He was determined to destroy these men to maintain his dignity. He attacked without hesitation. However, to his surprise, Lin Feng's strength had increased tremendously. Lin Feng stretched out his right hand and grasped the air. Suddenly, a tsunami-like force surged towards Thanos. Thanos felt this force was unpredictable, like a lone boat in the ocean, vulnerable to being swallowed at any moment. He told himself that this was just Lin Feng's trick, the same one that had tricked him last time. So, recklessly, he rushed towards Lin Feng. Seeing this, Lin Feng smiled faintly and gently pressed his palm. The seawater instantly materialized and rushed towards Thanos. When it touched Thanos, it turned into solid ice, like a 1,000-year-old iceberg, exuding a biting chill. Thanos sensed Lin Feng's strength was no bluff and knew he was injured. He knew that if he didn't leave, he would be in danger of being annihilated. He reasoned that since these people could protect Lin Feng, there was no need to pursue them relentlessly. His primary mission was to find those opponents who hadn't yet matured and eliminate them one by one. With a swift shift of consciousness, he vanished from this place, returning to his original dimension. Lin Feng was delighted with his own strength. He had never intended to utterly destroy Thanos, and now that he had escaped, he wasn't concerned. He knew that from now on, he no longer had to fear Thanos. This time, Lin Feng's presence once again aided Captain America, successfully defeating Thanos. Although Thanos had escaped this dimension, the four present faced a new challenge. They couldn't remain here for long, they needed to travel to another dimension. However, if they left, Thanos could take advantage of the opportunity to return, which would be a serious problem. Therefore, they decided to use this time to train Captain America, at least to equip him with the ability to protect himself. Captain America pondered this and felt that this was indeed the case. Since receiving the genetic potion, he had yet to fully realize his potential. Despite clashing with others several times, he was repeatedly defeated. He sensed that his own strength was far greater than this. Moreover, after witnessing Lin Feng's prowess, he was filled with envy. If he could be as powerful, he wouldn't need anyone's protection. So, he gladly accepted the training program. Although Lin Feng wasn't familiar with the training methods, he could still provide assistance with energy management and practical combat experience. They discussed and developed a detailed training plan. Rhodes was responsible for planning Captain America's training and assisting him in developing his energy. Lin Feng taught him energy control and fighting techniques. Thor, known for his fiery temper and strained relationship with Captain America, unfortunately became their sparring partner. Initially, Captain America was overwhelmed, often losing within 3 rounds. Frustrated, he quickly regained his composure and continued training. Lin Feng shared his insights on energy control, guiding him on how to harness his power and also imparting some combat experience. Although these experiences stemmed from Eastern martial arts, they were still valuable lessons for Captain America. Furthermore, Lin Feng had also gained some of the power of Poseidon, the god of the sea, and used it to teach Captain America even more combat techniques. Everyone had a clear understanding of Captain America's future development path, and training was rigorously conducted according to this standard. Soon, the results were remarkable. In the past, Captain America and Thor often struggled to last more than 3 rounds in a duel. Now, the two could fight for over 50 rounds without being defeated. This excited him greatly. Despite the frequent setbacks during training, he was satisfied with such progress in such a short period of time. However, Lin Feng poured cold water on him. While your strength has improved, it's still far from enough to defeat Thanos. You've fought him before, so you know how powerful he is. You're still far from his match. I fought him before, and I know his strength well. He wasn't at his full strength when he fought you. Later, I will simulate Thanos' power and fight you. If you can last 10 rounds, you'll be considered a winner. Captain America was shocked and excited upon hearing this. He was well aware of Lin Feng's strength, and sparring with him was undoubtedly a rare opportunity to gain experience. So, in the days that followed, he trained even harder. Finally, the day for his sparring session with Lin Feng arrived. Lin Feng gave it his all, attacking Captain America with all his might. Despite Captain America's caution, he was defeated after 8 moves. He sighed inwardly, but remained undeterred. This had exceeded his expectations. Everyone was pleased with his training. While he might not be able to defeat Thanos yet, he was more than capable of escaping this place. So, after discussion, they decided to leave this place and return to their original world. A week had passed since the battle. They speculated that Thanos' injuries had healed. If so, he would soon launch his next attack. They couldn't linger any longer. After a heartfelt farewell, they arrived at a deserted clearing. Lin Feng took a deep breath of fresh air and retrieved a feather from his side. This feather would be the key to his return to his original timeline. He gently waved the feather, and a surge of blue energy lifted it into the air. He then pulled out the river map and the Luoshu, preparing to harness the power of space and time for the first time. Though he felt a touch of trepidation, he was also filled with curiosity and a thirst for exploration. After completing the time travel, he would still need to harness the power of time to guide the 3 of them across dimensions, across the river of time, following the feather's guidance to find their way home. This series of maneuvers nearly exhausted his strength, but it also deepened his understanding of time and space. When they finally returned to the present day, they were met by two people waiting in the distance, the Ancient One and Doctor Strange. This was their second time travel, and they seemed more relaxed than before. Upon seeing them return, the Ancient One eagerly exclaimed, "I can sense Thanos' injuries have healed almost completely. His resilience is truly remarkable. I suspect his next target might be the Hulk." Despite their recent return, the three had no time to rest, their mission pressing. They knew that as long as they arrived in time, they would have a plan in place. After all, Lin Feng's current strength far surpassed Thanos's. The Ancient One sensed the immense power emanating from Lin Feng and was filled with doubt. This power seemed even more powerful than before, perhaps even holding secrets beyond her comprehension. She vaguely suspected that it might be Lin Feng who had wounded Thanos. Lin Feng pondered for a moment and asked, "Do you know which timeline he's currently in? That way we can prepare." Doctor Strange mused, "We don't know his exact state yet, but we suspect he's at an earlier point in time." Lin Feng understood, the unknown is always the most terrifying. He immediately decided to travel back in time with Thor and Rhodes. Arriving at the target time, Rhodes quickly located the location and discovered it was still early, meaning the Hulk hadn't yet mutated due to the failed experiment. This gave them some relief, at least in this timeline, they still had a chance. They decided to secretly monitor the Hulk while also being wary of Thanos' appearance. Lin Feng knew that after 2 time travels, his power was significantly diminished. Therefore, he planned to use this time to recuperate in preparation for the upcoming challenge. Thor and Rhodes understood this. Fully aware of the power and mystery of space-time, and the immense energy required to wield such a force, they had complete confidence in Lin Feng and fully supported his decision. They found a cafe to rest for a while before resuming their surveillance of the Hulk. Should Thanos appear, they would be able to react swiftly and arrive on the scene in time. The three of them lay lurking nearby for a long time, though they had tried to remain relaxed and avoid close contact with their target as before. To this day, they had not had any direct contact with the Hulk, merely silently waiting. The waiting always seemed long and tedious. Although they could wait patiently, a sense of anxiety was inevitable. After all, Thanos had not appeared, leaving them with a lingering feeling. Thor and Rhodes found it difficult to truly calm down. Lin Feng knew that if Thanos appeared, the surrounding space would inevitably undergo subtle distortions. He wasn't far from the Hulk's location. As soon as he sensed the spatial distortion, he could rush to the scene with lightning speed. Coincidentally, he had recently mastered the Earth-Flying Golden Light technique, one of the 36 heavenly powers transformations. His speed rivaled the rainbow transformation technique he'd learned from Donghuang Tai. He was fully confident he could reach the Hulk quickly if he encountered danger. Consequently, he wasn't worried at all and even began practicing right there. His previous 2 time travels had deepened his understanding of time, and now was the perfect opportunity to digest what he'd learned. His command of space had also improved significantly, developing several spatial skills. While these were only basic, they were immensely beneficial to his power. However, his temporal abilities proved challenging. He attempted to harness his temporal abilities to create powerful techniques, such as restoring his opponent's strength to their original state or draining their vitality, but his attempts failed repeatedly and only served to drain him of his energy. He had a vague premonition that Thanos was about to appear. Now was not the time for risk, so he temporarily set aside his studies of time and devoted himself entirely to cultivation. Sure enough, it wasn't long before he noticed changes in the surrounding space. His study of time and space had made him exceptionally sensitive to spatial fluctuations. This change was strikingly similar to the one Thanos had last seen beside Captain America. He immediately summoned Thor and Rhodes, ready to engage. Just as Thanos was about to strike, he noticed 3 familiar faces appear before him, a source of considerable concern. These 3 men followed him wherever he went. At this moment, Lin Feng combined the water laws of Poseidon, the god of the sea, with the imperial might of the Jade Emperor, instantly overwhelming Thanos. He felt as if he were being oppressed by space, feeling uncomfortable and his strength steadily weakening. He involuntarily rushed towards Lin Feng. Thanos knew Lin Feng was the strongest of the 3. If he could defeat him, the other 2 would be no threat. Thor and Rhodes might cause him some trouble, but they were not a significant threat. He was confident he could easily defeat them alone. However, this sudden appearance of Lin Feng presented a formidable challenge. Initially, Lin Feng's strength wasn't exceptional, but he was confident he could defeat him. But for some reason, Lin Feng's power increased rapidly, catching him off guard. In a previous encounter, Lin Feng had used a strange force to freeze him. If he hadn't used his power to shift space and time, the outcome would have been uncertain. Although he was confident he wouldn't lose, he also knew the price would be high. He valued his life, and this plan was a spur-of-the-moment idea, and he didn't want to lose it. Therefore, he tried to escape, but found that Lin Feng was always in pursuit. 156. Chapter 155. The aircraft carrier was surrounded by dogs. 156. Chapter 155. The aircraft carrier is surrounded by dogs. 2024-09-10. Author, Good Monster. Chapter 155. The aircraft carrier is surrounded by dogs. Pierce's words were a bit incoherent, but the other Hydra members had already understood what he meant and fell silent. They were not stupid, but they still relied on the superior mentality that humans were the most intelligent creatures on Earth. They always felt that even if a dog had some special abilities, it would not be possible for it to fight against their 3 aircraft carriers. However, there were many among them who were very familiar with myths and legends, and knew that some ancient myths worshipped gods that were not human-shaped. If the dog in front of them was actually a guardian god, then its power would not necessarily be weaker than that of a human-shaped god just because it was in dog form. For a moment, several thoughts flashed through everyone's mind. In the end, it was a fanatic who spoke first. Even if it's a guardian deity, we've already offended it. There's no chance of negotiation. Let's give it a try. Use all your weapons at full power. We might be able to stop it. I don't believe it. It's just a dog. How can it possibly bite through our aircraft carrier? Just as these words were shouted, everyone heard another thunderous bark. This one was different from the previous ones, filled with deep anger and dissatisfaction. How dare you look down on me? They seemed to hear this roar, and they couldn't help but debate a little, wondering if they were hallucinating. But the next moment, they didn't have time to consider whether it was a hallucination. The sound of collisions continued, and the 3 aircraft carriers shook violently as if they were under bomb attack. What's attacking the aircraft carriers? The crew members on the aircraft carriers immediately checked the peripheral surveillance footage, but were shocked speechless by the images. They saw dogs again, but not just one, but dozens, perhaps even hundreds. Clearly thousands of meters away. Just moments ago, they were within striking distance of the aircraft carrier in the blink of an eye. How fast could this creature be? Even more astonishing was how it suddenly multiplied to 100. The thermal imaging camera confirmed that it was clearly just one dog charging towards the carrier. These foreigners could never have imagined that Chinese divine magic included the cheat of incarnation. Hundreds of roaring sky dogs simultaneously rammed into the carrier. Bang, bang, bang. The vibrations grew increasingly violent, cracks appearing in its hull, forged from the toughest alloy. Several engines malfunctioned from the impact, sparking and shutting down. In an instant, the 3 massive aircraft carriers were surrounded by hundreds of dogs. And it looked as if they could be slowly gnawed to death by these hundreds of dogs. What a ridiculous scene, yet no one could laugh out loud. Even more horrifying was yet to come. A monitor suddenly cried out, "Why are they increasing in number again?" The scream drew everyone's attention to the screen in front of her. As they watched, a black dog slowly split into 2, then 2 into 4, and in an instant, their number multiplied several-fold. The new dogs were every bit as imposing and powerful as the previous one. Even the timid ones collapsed in fear. How can we possibly handle this? If there had been only one of these strange dogs, Hydra wouldn't have dared to fight them, no matter how powerful they were, armed with all sorts of weapons. But now, in the blink of an eye, their numbers had multiplied several times. Suddenly, Hydra went from fighting this dog to this dog fighting them. Could they possibly win? But if they didn't fight, were they going to let this dog's brute force smash their aircraft carrier into pieces? They were now 10,000 meters in the air. If the aircraft carrier was shattered, their fate would be even more tragic than those who died on the ground. For a moment, the men aboard the carriers shared the despair of those under fire on the ground. At that moment, Pierce suddenly gritted his teeth, stood up, and said, "Send a message to the pilots of the other 2 carriers. Tell them to fly as far as possible, in 2 different directions, at maximum speed. The main ship, stop these dogs. Hold the strafing of the ground. Focus all your weapons on this one. I just don't believe it can clone itself endlessly." His orders were given, and the crews immediately followed them. Soon, the other 2 carriers increased their speed, And indeed, catching Howling Sky Dog off guard, they broke free from the encirclement. Howling Sky Dog attempted to continue the pursuit, but then immediately launched weapons at its clones, raining down countless tiny needles and bullets. Howling Sky Dog's eyes lit up. A one-sided collision was boring, but now they were finally fighting back. This was getting interesting. Howling Sky Dog howled, retracted some of its clones, and focused solely on attacking the main ship. However, its actions misled the men on the main ship, who believed their tactics were working. Pierce's mind relaxed, then a sinister smile returned. It's just a foolish dog. No matter how arrogant it gets, it'll still be led by me. You think you can stop Hydra? You think you can save those people down there? Wishful thinking. The two fleeing aircraft carriers continued their mopping up plan, while the main ship immediately went on the defensive, still unleashing all its firepower on the Howling Sky Dog. On the ground, those who had noticed no new casualties for several minutes breathed a sigh of relief, only to discover that the invisible, deadly weapon had reappeared. No matter how deep they hid, no matter how they covered themselves, it was all in vain. The survivors watched helplessly as their loved ones, hugged tightly to them, suddenly stiffened and lost their lives. Many collapsed under the pressure, abandoning their hiding places and running into the streets, screaming and wailing, hoping for a quick death. Death didn't spare them either. Weapons rained down like raindrops, and people fell to the ground one after another like felled trees. Why? Why does China have gods protecting them, but we have nothing? Where's God? Where's our God? Where's our Jehovah? Where's our Archangel? I don't want to believe in any god anymore. I want to believe in the great God Yangjian. I want to go to China. I don't want to stay in this hellhole anymore. Countless people, from despair to resentment, roared in anger and cursed. However, nothing could stop the march of death. Countless people froze in the midst of their curses, collapsing headfirst to the ground. Some didn't even have time to finish their curses, the rest of their words trapped in their leaky bodies forever. Still others remained silent, their hearts broken, calmly waiting for death. And indeed, they died the next moment. 157. Chapter 156, Fire-Breathing Behemoth. 157. Chapter 156, The Fire-Breathing Behemoth, 2024-09-10, Author, Good Monster. Chapter 156, The Fire-Breathing Behemoth. Some of the living, those still able to speak out online, exposed this incident to the world. They also angrily questioned why the government allowed such a vicious incident to occur, with no intention of saving the people. Others wondered why, if the government lacked the power to combat the disaster, they didn't turn to China for help, asking China's great god Yangjian to assist them. The U.S. top brass was already deeply troubled. They had borne the brunt of this disaster. Most officials, including the president, had perished in the instant the incident struck. Those who survived were small-time officials, too small to make decisions. It wasn't that they didn't want to seek help from China, but their status and positions meant they had no channels to contact them. And as they struggled to find a way to reach out, another wave of silent deaths descended upon them, further slowing progress. As a result, the entire United States was paralyzed. The government was powerless to contain this sudden, widespread, and vicious massacre. Seeking aid from China proved daunting, and organizing a military counterattack was absurd. The Pentagon was already entrenched in Hydra, and even their use of military force to exacerbate the situation was a blessing. The government was unable to control or resolve the situation, unable to even issue a single notice. Naturally, the people could only helplessly await death. The death of one person brought shock, 2 brought shock, 3 brought shock, and 4 brought despair. But what did the simultaneous deaths of thousands, even tens of thousands, bring? Numbness. Realizing that no matter how hard they tried to hide, no matter how hard they struggled, they could not save their loved ones or themselves, people became dejected, sitting beside the corpses, waiting for their fate to befall them. Seeing the horrific scene on the ground, many Hydra members burst into laughter. This is how the world should be, cry, scream. Let your despair and resentment be mixed with death, becoming the perfect sacrifice for our plan. A loud bang interrupted their arrogant laughter, and at the same time, everyone noticed the temperature in the cabin suddenly rise to an abnormally high temperature. They began to sweat uncontrollably, and their feet moved involuntarily. The sparks of short circuits and explosions continued in the cabin. Some equipment went out after a loud bang, and no matter how the monitors adjusted it, it never came back on. The clear sound of impact continued, completely different from the previous one. The previous impact was low and muffled, and although it was continuous, it was clear that the hardness of one side was significantly less than the other. After all, it was a dog's flesh and blood hitting an aircraft carrier. If they hadn't seen it with their own eyes today, who would believe that the hardness of a dog's body could be compared to that of alloy? But even then, even flesh and blood, imbued with power, was still flesh and blood, its sound muffled. The sound they heard now was completely different. It was the clashing of metal on metal. Loud, sharp, and terrifying. Something else has come to aid that idiot, Pierce cursed, turning his gaze from the ground monitor to the one outside the carrier. As his eyes met the footage, Pierce's eyes widened in disbelief, nearly popping out of their sockets. What the hell? What the hell is this? He saw a massive monster, at least 10 meters long. It resembled a wolf, part dog, and emanated an oppressive black aura. Its crimson eyes were filled with murderous intent. As if sensing Pierce's observation, the beast whipped around, its razor-sharp gaze meeting Pierce's. In that instant, Pierce felt as if a knife had pierced his chest and back. A chill washed over him, and he couldn't help but want to order a blast. However, before he could utter the command, a stream of crimson flame erupted from the beast's mouth, hurtling towards the camera. Pierce instinctively dodged backward, trying to avoid the fire hurtling toward him. With a final crackle, the monitor screen went dark. Only then did Pierce recover. No matter how powerful the flames were, they couldn't possibly penetrate the monitor screen and reach him. He was overwhelmed by the beast's aura, and he was frightened. Even after realizing what was happening, he didn't have the courage to look at the beast again. Its gaze was like that of a wolf locking onto its prey. Even a single glance would shatter one's soul. A second glance. Pierce knew he would completely collapse. Pierce wasn't the only one. The other Hydra members were horrified by the sight of this behemoth. Those not on the aircraft carrier were relatively safe. Those hiding within, the thought of such a terrifying beast lurking outside terrified them, leaving them completely helpless. This behemoth was naturally one of Roaring Sky Dog's incarnations. Besides clones, it could also use Dharmakaya. It was Erlang Shen's dog. If it didn't have this ability, how could it dare boast to others about being Erlang Shen's beloved pet? Currently, it was wielding the primary Dharmakaya of heaven and earth and the magical Samadhi true fire. Not only had its size increased hundreds of times, but its body had become almost steel, its hairs standing up like spikes. Every impact dented the aircraft carrier. But after a few collisions, it felt bored and wanted to practice its skills seriously. It took a few steps back, opened its mouth, and began brewing the Samadhi true fire. Just as it brewed a small amount, it noticed someone watching it through the glowing red object. As a hunting dog, it preferred open-air battles and attacks, and hated the sight of others watching from the shadows, waiting for its prey to burst forth and snatch it away. So, Roaring Sky Dog unleashed its newly brewed Samadhi true fire at the surveillance camera without hesitation. The coward who only dared to watch from behind was scared to death by just a small amount of fire. After this, Roaring Sky Dog brewed a new flame. This time, he took longer to prepare, and the fireball in his mouth became even more red, hot, and pure. 158. Chapter 157, Scared by a Dog. 158. Chapter 157, Terrified by a Dog. 2024-09-10. Author, Good Monster. Chapter 157, Terrified by a Dog. After about 10 seconds, Howling Sky Dog raised its head, opened its mouth a little wider, aimed at the aircraft carrier's center console, and unleashed a long dragon of fire. The dragon surged forward, instantly melting everything, no matter how hard the titanium alloy, into molten iron. The people inside the center console had assumed that no matter how the dog attacked, it would take some effort to harm them. But they hadn't expected that a single blow would nearly burn through the center console, reducing it to ash. Retreat. Retreat to the interior, someone shouted in terror. We can't retreat. If we leave the center console, we won't be able to control the carrier. The consequences will be even more dangerous, another shouted back, his face flushed. Many people asked Pierce what to do next, but Pierce remained pale and silent. The pager buzzed with voices from various factions. Pierce, what's going on over there? Didn't you just say you'd subdued that dog? What's going on now? If it doesn't work, evacuate the mothership. The person who was saying this was interrupted by another fanatic mid-sentence. How can we evacuate the mothership? We've spent decades painstakingly building this. How can we just abandon it? Pierce remained silent, but the two factions on the pager were already clamoring. Some of the more reasonable ones began to realize that this dog, which had appeared out of nowhere, was unusual and believed that they should retreat now, believing that it was better to save the trouble. However, some extreme fanatics refused to retreat. This was a crucial period for the final step of the plan. Evacuating the mothership would greatly undermine the effectiveness of the final plan. These people didn't care about the damage to the mothership, let alone the lives of those on board. They simply wanted to kill as many people on the ground as possible to lay a solid foundation for their own gains after the chaos. As the two factions bickered, Pierce slowly spoke. "There's good news and bad news. Which one do you want to hear first?" Someone immediately went berserk. "Don't keep us in suspense at this point. Tell us what you've discovered." Pierce chuckled softly. "The bad news is, this dog is incredibly powerful. Even with just a dozen rhyming strikes, it could rip the mothership apart, not to mention the strange fire it breathes. If it can breathe fire a second time, and still at this scale, then we shouldn't even think of anything else. Just sit back and wait for death." The repeated attacks had already strained his mental state. Even his voice carried a quiet, dead air. Though calm, it somehow felt a bit erratic. This calm, maddening quality frightened the others, and someone immediately questioned him. "Are you planning on escaping? If we don't flee now, we won't have the chance later." Pierce remained calm. "Coward Hydra, victory or death. Those who flee are unworthy of being Hydra's followers." Some, relying on their invulnerability on the ground, hurled insults at Pierce. But Pierce ignored them completely, forcing them to stand and move to the other center console. Some more reasonable people, remembering what Pierce had just said, quickly pressed the issue. "You said there was good news and bad news." "Bad news, but what about the good news?" Pierce opened the button cover and fiddled with the center console. "The good news is that this dog, now larger, will be easier for our weapons to locate, even if it's still as fast as before, and it won't have as many clones. We can try to use our weapons against it." As he spoke, a flick of his finger completed the loading and aiming of the weapons, with several mechanical guns trained on the howling sky dog. This time, Pierce pressed the red button without hesitation. "Let's try. This is our only hope of victory." As Pierce pressed a button, many of the main ship's remaining gun barrels and muzzles swung, aiming at howling sky dog. The behemoth now hovered about 20 meters in front of the mothership, a dragon of fire condensing in its mouth. Even its pure black fur took on a tinge of orange-red from its intense rage. This intense rage, even through the few remaining monitors, oppressed every Hydra member. At the same time, they trusted Pierce's judgment. If a dragon of fire of that magnitude were sprayed again, the main ship would be completely destroyed, and they wouldn't even have the chance to escape. The behemoth had condensed the dragon of fire in less than 10 seconds. 10 seconds wasn't even enough time for them to run from the main control panel to the control room. Whoosh, 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 a continuous stream of weapons erupted from the turrets and gun barrels. Regardless of caliber, these weapons, each capable of killing a life, poured down upon Howling Sky Dog without hesitation. Howling Sky Dog was mere seconds away from effortlessly conjuring a new fire dragon, but the overwhelming barrage of weapons made him frown. He could sense that these weapons wouldn't scratch his fur, but they would still pose a threat to his eyes and delicate mouth. So, he closed his eyes and mouth, scattering the unconstructed fire dragons. Then, using his ears to move, he leaped upward, dodging all the weapons that were directed at him. His performance re-energized the Hydra members. It worked. Our attacks worked on this thing. It retracted its flames. We repelled them. I knew it was just a paper tiger. Nothing to fear. Everyone else chatted excitedly, except Pierce, who remained silent, sitting at the center console. The equipment operator nearby asked cautiously, "Why, are you unhappy?" Pierce sneered, his tone still sounding as deadpan as ever. "Do you really think this is a victory? The bullets we just fired accounted for 1/10 of our inventory, and that dog dodged them all. We've completely used up all of them. It only takes a few seconds for that dog to regenerate its fireballs. The cost of firing another volley would be unimaginable. To resolve this problem right now, a head-on confrontation isn't the answer. We can only flee before he condenses a new fire dragon." As Pierce finished speaking, the group on the pager began to grow unhappy again. "You're exaggerating the role of this dog. It's not a real hellhound. Can it rush into the center console and bite off your neck? If your weapons are not enough, increase the continuous output and let the gun barrel follow this stupid dog closely, or call the other 2 aircraft carriers to assist in shooting, so that this dog has nowhere to hide. There is definitely a possibility of hitting his hard and killing him. Is Pierce addicted to being a coward? He thinks about running away when he encounters problems. No matter what, you are not allowed to run this time. Go straight in. I don't believe that the aircraft carrier that we, Hydra, have spent years to build can't even compare to a stupid dog. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelis. There you'll find the original version of this story, and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. 270. Chapter 269, Too Cautious. 270. Chapter 269, Too Cautious. 2024, 1211. Author, Good Monster. Returning to their original time and space, the Ancient One informed them that Thanos had not been completely destroyed. However, they were mentally prepared for this and did not panic excessively. Fortunately, Thanos remained inactive for a short while. Although he survived the fierce battle with Lin Feng, he was severely injured and needed time to recover. This period of time provided Lin Feng and his companions with a moment's rest. After all, the constant travel between time and space had consumed a tremendous amount of their energy. To allow Lin Feng to fully engage Thanos, the Ancient One used her time magic to discover a magical crystal that could contain her time power. This way, whenever she used her time travel technique, Lin Feng would not have to expend his own energy to help them return. This ingenious arrangement pleased Lin Feng immensely, allowing him to unleash his full power without reservation. Using the river chart and a Luoshu, Lin Feng continued to divine and predict Thanos' next target. Whenever Thanos attempted a move, Lin Feng always managed to be the first to appear before his victim, leaving him helpless. This frustrates Thanos, who cannot understand how Lin Feng could so often foresee the situation and save his life at the crucial moment. Even when he tried to conceal his whereabouts, he could not escape the observation of Rhodes, Thor, and Lin Feng. Even more unsettling for Thanos was Lin Feng's steadily increasing strength. Despite inheriting immense power, Lin Feng initially struggled due to lack of mastery, making his combat somewhat awkward. However, over the course of his numerous encounters with Thanos, his combat skills improved, his control of power becoming increasingly fluid, and his fighting style became increasingly effective. Meanwhile, Thanos' initial dominance gradually shifted to a level of even strength, and he even began to feel overwhelmed. The rapidity of Lin Feng's growth astounded Thanos. He found it difficult to defeat Lin Feng, and was often even outmatched. Had he not left behind a clone before each attack, ready for resurrection, he would have been defeated long ago. However, each resurrection was accompanied by intense pain and a drain on his strength. Thanos knew that if this continued, his power would gradually weaken. Lin Feng taught each person he rescued his meticulously prepared combat techniques, enabling them to grow and reach strength far beyond their peers. This posed a significant headache for Thanos. He had intended to nip their growth in the bud, but instead, he had only amplified their power. Now, destroying them was an impossibility. Thanos was filled with rage. This unexpected adversary, Lin Feng, seemed designed to oppose him. Lin Feng was not only incredibly powerful, but he could also predict his movements. Thanos was convinced that without Lin Feng, his plan would have succeeded. While Rhodes and Thor possessed considerable strength, they were still inferior to Thanos, and he was confident he could defeat them both within 10 moves. However, a bold idea suddenly occurred to Thanos. Since Lin Feng existed in this time and space, his presence must have been traced back through time. Lin Feng's growth was astonishing. Thanos hadn't taken him seriously when they first met, but now he had grown into a formidable foe. Thanos suspected a hidden reason behind Lin Feng's rapid growth. Thus, he conceived the idea of traveling back in time to destroy Lin Feng before he could mature. He believed that if he could find Lin Feng, he could easily defeat him and perhaps seize his magical weapon, further enhancing his own power. Even the combined might of all heroes might not be a match for him. With this ambition in mind, Thanos resolutely left his present time and embarked on a quest to find and destroy Lin Feng. Upon their return to the real world, they thought everything was settled, but unexpectedly, the Ancient One arrived. Using divination, she discerned Thanos' plot. He was attempting to travel back to the timeline of Lin Feng's first arrival, intending to eliminate him before he had fully grown. Lin Feng was horrified. He knew that when he first arrived, his system was not fully functional, his power was meager, and he was a completely different person from what he is today. Back then, he was a mere nobody, his strength a far cry from his current. Thanks to the power of the Jade Emperor and Poseidon, he gradually gained the strength to challenge Thanos. If Thanos truly found his past self, the consequences would be disastrous, as the fates of the two versions of himself were linked. If the past were destroyed, the present would cease to exist. Rhodes and Thor were equally shocked upon hearing this. They had not expected Thanos to resort to such extreme measures. Among the three, Lin Feng was the most powerful, but his power had only recently risen. They knew that if Lin Feng were destroyed, they would be in danger. So, Rhodes and Thor requested the Ancient One to transport them to Lin Feng's time and space to help him escape. However, the Ancient One shook her head, expressing her apprehension. She explained that a mysterious power emanating from Lin Feng had sealed that time and space. While she could open a passage, the two of them were not strong enough to travel through it. Furthermore, this matter could only be resolved by Lin Feng himself, who could use his abilities to seal the timeline and protect himself from interference. The Ancient One also revealed that Lin Feng had mastered some of the power of time and space. While the source was unknown, his potential for growth was extremely high. Therefore, Lin Feng would have to resolve this matter alone. Rhodes and Thor were both dissatisfied and frustrated upon hearing this. Although the battles had been going well recently, they had relied heavily on Lin Feng. They felt their own strength was insufficient, unable to provide effective support. Seeing this, Lin Feng smiled and reassured, "Don't worry. This matter was caused by me, so I will resolve it. You know my strength well. Thanos is no match for me right now. Once this is resolved, we will fight side by side again. You should also take this opportunity to strive for improvement, otherwise you will fall behind again in the next operation." Rhodes and Thor reflected on this, and it was true. If they didn't intensify their training, they might never be able to stand shoulder to shoulder with Lin Feng. So, they decided to stay and train, leaving Lin Feng to face this crisis alone. Once Lin Feng was ready, he asked the Ancient One to activate the spatial barrier. This time, the Ancient One expended far more energy than ever before, evidently because the mysterious power of Lin Feng's space-time was hindering the flow of energy. Lin Feng pondered this power, wondering if it might be connected to the system that had brought him here and prevented outsiders from glimpsing its secrets. However, Lin Feng had no time for further reflection at the moment, for he knew he was facing a life-or-death situation. He pondered for a moment, realizing he had to handle this alone. Bringing others along might lead to complications due to his own overly cautious nature. He decided to make every possible preparation, bringing all his magical weapons with him, just in case. After all, if something went wrong on this trip, they might never be used again. As he pondered this, Thor approached him and said sincerely, "Although I can't come with you, I feel you're still lacking a useful piece of equipment. How about I lend you my Thor's hammer? It's like I'm fighting alongside you." Thor then handed him the hammer. Seeing this, Lin Feng couldn't help but smile wryly. He simply couldn't control this Western artifact, its energies were incompatible with his own magical powers. Beyond a hammer's sharpness, he couldn't unleash its true power. Furthermore, he had no shortage of magical weapons, he simply wasn't too lazy to use them. So, he politely declined Thor's offer, "Thanks, but I have more than enough magical weapons. This hammer won't do me much good," Thor replied seriously. "Yeah, it's just a hammer." Lin Feng was left in a state of confusion. Meanwhile, Rhodes pulled Thor aside. Knowing Lin Feng's immense strength, he naturally dismissed these magical weapons. They firmly believed Lin Feng could defeat Thanos. Meanwhile, the Ancient One and Doctor Strange arrived. Together, they planned to open a time wormhole and send Lin Feng back in time. Rhodes was puzzled. In the past, the Ancient One had been able to open the time barrier on his own and store his power in a small device for use upon his return. But this time, he needed Doctor Strange's help. Lin Feng, too, was curious. Was there something special about this? Seeing their confusion, the Ancient One and Doctor Strange explained, "This journey is exceptionally difficult. Lin Feng also possessed considerable power in the past, protected by a mysterious force. Therefore, the temporal barrier at that point in time was exceptionally solid, making it difficult for us to open it alone. This is why only Lin Feng can go, and why it requires the combined efforts of the two of us to open the passage, Lin Feng suddenly understood. He knew full well that his past was protected by a powerful and mysterious system. This was a good thing, at least it would ensure that the temporal barrier of the past could not be easily opened. Besides Thanos, perhaps only the Ancient One and Doctor Strange could open it. And after returning to the past, he could use his existing power to reinforce the barrier, preventing Thanos from returning again. So, the Ancient One and Doctor Strange worked together, and the temporal barrier slowly opened. However, the effort was immense, and they seemed somewhat overwhelmed. Lin Feng didn't hesitate and immediately leaped into the time tunnel. He knew the barrier couldn't remain stable for long. He had to return to the past before the passage collapsed, otherwise he would expend even more energy to teleport. This matter hinged on life and death, so Lin Feng dared not neglect the slightest bit, moving even faster than usual. However, he was unaware that the Ancient One had already installed a mirror device on him. Lin Feng passed through the end of the time tunnel and stepped onto the bustling streets of Manhattan. Amidst the throng, he blended in unnoticed. Suddenly, a voice echoed from within him. It was the Ancient One, communicating with him through the mirror image he had previously installed. This device, an experiment of the Ancient One, allowed them to see Lin Feng's situation in real time and offer immediate solutions to any problems. Manhattan was unfamiliar to Lin Feng. Getting lost would be a real problem. With the guidance of the Ancient One and his companions, he struggled to find his past self. He approached and attempted to communicate with his past self. However, his past self refused to trust him. This posed a significant challenge to Lin Feng. He had assumed that simply revealing his true self would easily gain their trust. After all, his appearance was unique, and who wouldn't be suspicious of someone who looked exactly like him? But to his surprise, when he looked in the mirror, he discovered that his image was completely different from what he saw in his past self. Curious, he asked the Ancient One why. The Ancient One explained that the same person couldn't exist in the same space at the same time. If they did, they would appear differently to each other. Upon hearing this, Lin Feng realized his plan had failed. He could only patiently explain it to his past self. However, while his past self had heard of the ability to time, he had never seen it firsthand. Faced with this sudden stranger, he was wary. After all, he had just arrived in this world, his strength was still weak, and he knew not to trust others easily. Seeing this, Lin Feng felt helpless but unwilling to give up. He decided to quietly follow. The past self, noticing someone following him through his system, circled the path and set numerous traps. While these traps posed no threat to Lin Feng, they were a headache. He hadn't expected his past self to be so resourceful in dealing with him. But this was also his past self. If his past self were harmed, the power would surely be fed back to his present self. Therefore, he didn't dare act rashly. He could only swallow his frustration and continue to follow. Seeing the man still determined to escape, Lin Feng used his special abilities to travel through the streets of Manhattan. Lin Feng, possessing the same ability, followed closely behind. However, this pursuit proved fruitless and only made the past Lin Feng even more wary. A headache gripped Lin Feng. After tracking him for a while, he noticed his own aura growing weaker. Sensing something amiss, he hurried forward. He lifted the past Lin Feng's robe, only to find a phantom beneath. The past Lin Feng had vanished. This left Lin Feng utterly embarrassed. He then remembered that his past self had mastered the ability to create a separate form. Creating a clone and escaping the scene would have been a piece of cake. He quickly searched the area and found he could still track his past self. But he decided not to get any closer. His past self didn't trust him. Continuing to follow him might make him even more wary, or even flee. If Thanos appeared, he feared he wouldn't be able to come to his rescue. So, he could only follow quietly from the shadows, not getting too close. He knew the system was powerful. Getting too close would likely lead to discovery. Master Ancient One and the others were observing all this through the mirror image. They hadn't expected that Lin Feng would be tricked by his past self. Although it didn't cause any serious consequences, it was still enough to give him a headache. They had known Lin Feng for so long, but this was the first time they had seen him in such a mess. They had never thought that he would fall into their hands one day. At this moment, Thor saw the scene and couldn't help but burst out laughing. They had never seen Lin Feng in such a mess, and seeing this scene, they felt so happy. Rhodes wanted to hold back his laughter, but in the end, he couldn't help it. Such a scene was so rare that he even wanted to take out his camera to record this moment forever as a precious souvenir. Just as the two of them were preparing to film, Master Ancient One's face was full of worry. 159. Chapter 158 Shadow Beast, No Escape. 159. Chapter 158, Shadow Behemoth, No Escape. 2024-09-10 Author, Good Boy Monster. Chapter 158, Shadow Behemoth, No Escape. Pierce didn't get angry at the accusations. The drastic ups and downs in a short period of time had already tormented his mind to a point of numbness. Moreover, he knew better than anyone that those accusing him were fanatics with no rational reason. They had lost their ability to think normally. Even now, on an aircraft carrier, facing the pressure of this fiery behemoth, they would not change their mind. In their hearts, Hydra's plan was bound to succeed, and nothing could stand in their way. But Pierce knew otherwise. He had observed Yang Jian up close and knew only too well the miraculous power of that punch. It could not only destroy but also save lives. Even across the universe, it could easily take the life it desired. How could humanity possibly defeat a being of this level? Pierce knew clearly that there was not the slightest chance of defeating it. He knew it deep down, feared it, trembled within his soul. In his utter despair, he couldn't help but roar. Fuck, everyone, open your eyes and see clearly. This attack may have forced back its flames, but did it do any harm to the beast itself? Not even a hair was singed. Most importantly, it's been aloft from the start. We used the most advanced technology to build aircraft carriers, allowing it to soar at such a massive size. This beast doesn't need to do anything. It's almost like it was born with this talent. Don't you understand how vast the gap is between us and it? He roared, almost heartbreakingly. Some, dazzled by the near victory, gradually cooled their nerves at his roar and began to pay more attention to the video. Meanwhile, Roaring Sky Dog leaped again, dodging the barrage of weapons. It wasn't that it lacked the strength to withstand direct attack, but it could more or less sense its master's intention. Its master wanted it to establish its reputation and prestige, to dispatch these scoundrels with decisive action, to fully demonstrate its power to the weaklings on the ground. Therefore, its mission wasn't to eliminate these cowards hiding within its iron hulk as quickly as possible, but to maximize its own prestige and prestige. Its mind was racing, mulling over which spell would create the most commotion. After a few twists and turns, it finally hit upon a technique perfectly suited for the moment. Look, it's changed again. Oh my god, what the hell is that? Everyone on the aircraft carrier stared at the screen in horror. Even those on the ground noticed the sudden shift in the sky, and all the survivors simultaneously raised their heads and gazed upwards. What they saw wasn't pitch-black clouds, but a truly profound black, spreading at a speed unimaginable, ultimately transforming into a silhouette that obscured half the sky. It looks like a wolf? A dog? Even the most devastated were completely captivated by the silhouette appearing in the sky. The silhouette resembled a beast crouching on the ground, its pointed ears raised and twitching constantly. Its furry tail, like a dark cloud or a furry whip, swept back and forth across the darkening horizon. This behemoth, neither real nor illusory, filled half the sky. The other half, though unoccupied by the shadow, seemed nonetheless affected. Even the sun, high in the sky, gradually dimmed and shimmered, rolling like a glass bead in the darkness before being swallowed up and vanished. Almost the entire United States was devoid of sunlight. Everyone was shrouded in shadow, yet strangely felt a sense of security. For since the shadow's appearance, the silent death had ceased. Even if they couldn't quite grasp the cause, they knew this, the shadow was protecting them. In the sky, the Hydra members gazed in horror at the behemoth outside the aircraft carrier. At this point, they didn't even need to peer through the surveillance screens. A single glance out the window revealed a vast, undulating black shadow. A towering beast, seemingly 100 meters tall, pressed its eyes against the aircraft carrier's window. Its blood-red eyes flickered with a faint, violent glint. A murderous aura rippled through them. Someone at the window accidentally met its gaze. At first, they didn't even realize the massive, blood-shimmering orb was actually an eye. As the eye drew closer, its pupils aligned, meeting the person's. They felt as if a sledgehammer had struck their head. They instantly lost consciousness. The others stared in horror as the man slumped to the ground. Reaching for his nose, they were even more horrified to discover he was no longer breathing. The person reaching for the dead man pulled back as if struck by lightning, collapsing to the ground, tears streaming down their face. What kind of monster is that? Where's the sun? Why is it gone? Did he swallow it? The sun hadn't been swallowed, merely obscured. This wasn't a learned technique, it was an innate divine power of roaring sky dog. Heavenly Dog swallows the sun. Upon unleashing this secret technique, his body would suddenly grow 100-fold, imbued with the power of infinite shadow. If it were performed during the day, the sun would be dimmed by its shadow, completely obscured, unable to shed a single ray of light. To this small, magical world, it was as if the sun had been swallowed by the Heavenly Dog. The Hydra's men naturally knew nothing of this divine power. But as they watched the enormous monster effortlessly wrap its ethereal form around the three motherships, they knew their doom was imminent. How could they defeat such a strange being? How could human-made weapons defeat it? Everyone began to chatter, their bodies trembling, like the despair of those underground, unable to escape death. They, too, were enveloped in fear and despair, their bodies paralyzed, unable to move, even as their brains raced to escape. Pierce stared blankly at the crimson eye. Eyes as large as the front of a truck, barely enough to fit within the window frame. Looking at those eyes, one could imagine the enormous size of this behemoth. Just when it was 10 meters tall, it could have shattered the alloy sheathing of an aircraft carrier with its flesh. Now that it was this size, what could it possibly do? Pierce didn't dare to think about it, the thought would drive him mad. He knew he couldn't escape death. He didn't want to endure the insane torture before his death. 160. Chapter 159, Heavenly Dog swallows the sun, everyone looks up. 160. Chapter 159 The Heavenly Dog swallows the sun, and everyone looks up to it. 2024-09-10 Author, Good Monster. Chapter 159 The Heavenly Dog swallows the sun, and everyone looks up to it. The red eye gradually left the window, and the Hydra members breathed a sigh of relief, but then they discovered that the retreat of the eye made another organ of the giant beast closer and closer to them. It was a gaping bloody mouth. Sharp teeth like swords and spears. A long inflexible tongue. They even vaguely saw the monster's penis at this moment. The next moment, a crisp shattering sound came from above. Pierce looked up in a daze. He saw sharp, huge teeth, biting through countless layers of alloy steel plates above his head like biting through plastic, and poking the center console in just a moment. The sharp fangs continued to move downwards, yet the moment seemed so long to Pierce. Crunch, AWW, Sky Howling Dog severed the main ship with a single bite, then swallowed the broken carrier into its mouth, chewing it with a relentless crunch. The carrier, considered impeccable by its sturdiness and formidable artillery, and considered by Hydra to be its ultimate trump card, was reduced to a pile of scrap metal by Sky Howling Dog. It was then spat out, tracing a vast parabola through the sky before falling into the Atlantic Ocean. What became of the people within, no one dared to imagine. The men on the other two carriers screamed in terror, desperately trying to maneuver their craft to escape. However, shadows, both visible and invisible, clung to the two carriers in all directions, like vines and claws, tightly binding them. With no escape possible, the men on the aircraft carrier could only watch helplessly as the monster turned its head, glaring at them with two crimson eyes. Then, with a wide grin, it opened its bloody maw, a mouth yawning like hell. Two chewed-up iron balls spat out of the Sky Howling Dog's mouth, also falling into the distant Atlantic Ocean. The Hydra remnants on the ground had completely lost contact with the aircraft carrier. But before the video feed went dark, each of them had seen the shadow-made vicious dog lash out with its fangs and claws, using the simplest, bestial bite to reduce decades of painstaking work to scrap metal. Yet, not a single one of them could muster any anger. What good was anger? Was this a force humanity could resist? No. In the face of such a force, humanity could only fear, submit, and tremble. The others didn't know the exact events, but the lack of new deaths for over 10 minutes gave them a sense of security, and they began to take to the streets, observing the strange phenomenon in the sky from places with wide views. At that moment, the shadows that obscured the sun shifted. Like a dog turning its head, the endless shadows moved. A pair of crimson eyes, like the sun and moon in the sky, filled everyone caught in their sight with a deep sense of fear. In contrast, the sun, revealed by the shifting shadows, was completely dim, barely resembling a sun at all. Someone with a camera immediately captured the scene. Many others captured the entire scene and uploaded it to social media. Although the massacre was stealthy and swift, it only affected humans, with minimal damage to infrastructure. News of the incident quickly spread across YouTube and Twitter. Many debated the origins of this inexplicable massacre, but even more attention was focused on the massive shadowy beast. Was it a monster or a god? People were speechless at the bizarre sight. The enormous shadow turned, its mouth opened, and the tiny sun, as if caught between its teeth, was swallowed. The world instantly grew even darker. Minutes later, the shadows gradually dissipated, revealing a clear sky. Sunlight began to filter through again, finally returning to normal after half an hour. Gazing at the sun high in the sky, and then taking in the clear, gentle breeze and the clear air around them, many people felt a sense of daze, a state of disorientation. It all felt like a dream. The slaughter that descended from the sky without cause, the monstrous beast that seemed to have swallowed the sun. Everything had come and gone so quickly. But the corpses strewn across the ground told the survivors that this was no dream. Unlike the ordinary people, celebrating their survival, the few remaining high-ranking American officials who had managed to survive were now, still recovering from the shock, debating countermeasures. The president is dead. Although the news hasn't been sent out yet, it won't be suppressed for long. Not just the president, but 12 governors have also perished in this incident. The Pentagon has been killed. 2 generals, 5 major generals, and half of the members of Congress are dead. One piece of bad news after another spread among the officials. Fortunately, the vice president was still alive, and now he was pushed forward to preside over the chaotic aftermath. His first order was to call all surviving central government officials and the remaining top officials in each state onto video call. And his first words to everyone during the video call were, "This must have been Hydra's doing. SHIELD was long ago infiltrated. This attack was orchestrated by the former director of SHIELD, and is currently under the temporary control of Steve Rogers." A video of former director Pierce ascending a strange aircraft carrier has been sent to me. I'll share it with you soon, but the problem now is that we must absolutely not let this news leak out. If the public knew that Hydra had infiltrated the country to this extent, if they knew this massacre was the result of Hydra's reckless behavior and the state's inability to oversee it, then America's national credibility would plummet to an all-time low. The disaster we've just experienced is already a major blow to public morale. We must not allow this to become public and further undermine public morale. In addition, we must immediately compile a death toll. If the number is significant, we will need to make appropriate redactions. The relevant work will undoubtedly be complex, but I hope you will diligently carry out your work and avoid leaving any obvious flaws that would give the public reason to question the government. These words silenced everyone. Easier said than done. They could still contain the internal shield videos for now, but the footage of the 3 aircraft carriers taking off had been seen by everyone in Washington, and the video had already been circulated on various platforms. It might have been okay if no one paid attention to it before, but now, after such a disaster, someone would surely realize that there was something wrong with the 3 aircraft carriers taking off. Even if only a small number of people went back and studied the videos, they would surely find many clues. Internet users are like Sherlock Holmes. There's no secret in this world that can't be uncovered by a serious audience. 161. Chapter 160, Guardian of the United States. 161. Chapter 160 The Guardian of the United States 2024-09-10 Author, Good Monster Chapter 160 The Guardian of the United States. How can the government curb this trend and stop the gossips? How can they lie with their eyes open? Cut down the high death toll? People are actually dying. How many people died? Can they just talk nonsense? They can't do it at all. Seeing that everyone was silent, not saying a word, and their faces were very ugly, the vice president knew that their thoughts were probably not optimistic. In fact, his own thoughts were not optimistic either. Right now, we may only have one way to go. What way? The black shadow that suddenly appeared in the sky, the vice president said in a deep voice. There was a video shot before this incident. After the aircraft carrier took off, a black dog also ran into the sky. I asked the most professional department to check. There is absolutely no trace of PS in this video. Some people gradually came to their senses. You mean to use this dog to cover up the details of the Hydra incident? The vice president nodded, a faint smile playing. How do you think this dog's strength compares to Yang Jian's? The crowd gradually regained their composure, lost in the joy of having survived. This joy was different from the joy they had experienced during the Renton incident. Back then, they were far from the center of the vortex. Although they knew that if things weren't handled properly, the entire planet would be buried with them, That was still too far away. Geographical distance dictated a distance between their hearts. While they worried about their own fate, they couldn't empathize with the residents of Renton. This time was different. The incident took place on American soil, over Washington, D.C. The United States, untouched by even the two world wars, had always been considered a land blessed by God, immune to disaster and war, but now it was the most direct side of disaster. This shattered everyone's long-held beliefs. Although no one ever said this out loud, everyone had always believed that living in the United States was different from living elsewhere. It was a land of absolute peace and tranquility. Now it's not. While people rejoiced, they were terrified, unsure when a similar disaster would strike again. But this fear also led many to indulge themselves, turning their revelry into even more reckless excess. Amid the nationwide chaos, some people did indeed begin to take notice of the 3 aircraft carriers going up in flames. But just as they were about to search for the videos they'd previously seen, a new video caught their attention. This new video was pushed to the top of YouTube. Whether Americans or those from other countries, anyone visiting YouTube would see it first. In the video, the white-haired vice president, with a solemn expression, first announced the president's death, then changed his expression to speak with pride. But this disaster isn't without good news. You've probably all thought this before. China has gods protecting us, why don't we in America? But now, I can tell you, we do have gods in America, and millions have witnessed their existence. That's it. A small video frame appeared in the president's lower right corner. It was the moment, captured by chance, of the heavenly dog swallowing the sun. Before the shadows vanished, its enormous mouth opened, seemingly swallowing the sun itself. A body so vast it obscured the sky. Eyes so glittering like the sun and moon. A power so overwhelming that just meeting those eyes could make one kneel in submission. Even watching through the video, one's teeth trembled. This is our God, the giant dog god, the vice president proudly introduced. Experts have already compiled detailed information about this god, and they will be released at the press conference soon. Please stay tuned. With that, the video ended. Many people were skeptical of the video, and this skepticism fueled their continued search. For a time, the words giant dog god dominated the search results on social media platforms like YouTube and Twitter. People were buzzing with discussion. I've never heard of the giant dog god. Is it really our god? With such overwhelming power, it must be a god. There's no doubt about it. If it's an American god, why hasn't it appeared before? Maybe, like Yang Jian, it's been dormant. This sudden event was so dramatic that it awakened it. The United States has only a short 200 years of history. How could it have its own gods? Why can't the United States have its own gods? Just because it's been founded for 200 years doesn't mean this land has only 200 years of history. Everything was going in the direction the marketing matrix hoped for. This faction and its fervent supporters argued over whether the giant dog god was an American god, even resorting to trash talk. Although ordinary passers-by would not participate in the quarrel, they were indeed attracted by the 3 words giant dog god. By the way, are these photos and videos real? Of course they're real. I saw it with my own eyes. The sight of the giant dog god hovering in the sky is much more ferocious than what he looks like in the photos. If you go and see it live, you'll be scared to pee your pants. I saw it too. My home is not in Washington, D.C., but in Minnesota, but I also saw the shadow of a dog in the sky. Even though it was very far away, we were still blocked from seeing even a ray of sunlight. If this dog is also a god, how does its divine power compare to Yang Jian's? Can the two of them fight? It's hard to say, but think about it. Yang Jian only knows how to fight with his fists, but the giant dog god directly changed his body shape to the point of occupying half the sky. I think if it was the giant dog god who showed up in Renton at that time, the whole thing would have been handled more easily. The giant dog god is so handsome. Yang Jian's ability is no match for him. The guardian god of the United States is the most powerful. After a slight quarrel, public opinion quickly unified its tone, and one voice dominated the mainstream. What's so great about a sliding guardian deity? Our American guardian deities are the most powerful. This cry, fueled by those with ulterior motives, instantly swept the internet. A group of rednecks were trembling with excitement upon hearing this, some even making dog standees and marching through the streets with them. But outside the United States, people around the world were skeptical. The United States, a country with only 200 years of history, had a civilization that hadn't been interrupted. How could it be possible that, like in China, so many previously undocumented gods suddenly emerged? But their doubts had no effect on the American public's jubilation. And that same American jubilation had no effect on Lin Feng, who, far away in China, was stroking Roaring Sky Dog's head and checking his points. 162. Chapter 161, No matter how much you blow, it's all for the sake of making wedding clothes. 162. Chapter 161, All the exaggeration, all for the wedding dress. 2024-09-10 Author, Good Monster. Chapter 161, All the exaggeration, all for the wedding dress. After Roaring Sky Dog appeared, the role-playing points really started to rise. The shock value is no less than the previous Lenten incident. This is really unexpected, but on reflection, Lin Feng didn't find it too surprising. As a media powerhouse, the United States' manipulation of the media and control of public opinion are far more advanced than China's. Their media matrix and publicity methods are far more professional and organized than those of China's wildly developed media. So, although the scale of the incident and the strength demonstrated are completely different, Roaring Sky Dog's destruction of the Hydra scoundrels and Yang Jian's resounding victory in Lenten are completely different. The American media has a knack for hyping the two events to the same level, striving to make everyone believe that Roaring Sky Dog and Yang Jian are on the same level. Oh, and now they've named Roaring Sky Dog the Giant Dog God. Thanks to their diligent promotional efforts, the story swept the globe in just half a day. Everyone knew about the giant dog that had suddenly appeared over the United States, officially heralded as the national guardian deity. The benefits of this were evident in the rapidly increasing system scores and shock value. In just one night, the gains were already worth half the entire Lenten incident. They'd better work harder to keep the buzz going. The US didn't disappoint Lin Feng either. Not only did the central and state governments issue official tweets, but major media outlets also worked together overnight, broadcasting the scene of the dog swallowing the sun as front-page headlines across traditional print media and online streaming platforms. As the situation intensified, even the Chinese were becoming increasingly concerned. Some government officials were inquiring about Lin Feng's phone number, hoping to privately consult him about the origins of this so-called giant dog god. Reporters from CCTV, numerous television stations, and various online platforms also contacted Lin Feng. Even Professor Feng Min couldn't resist sending him a WeChat message, asking him indirect questions. Lin Feng didn't answer anyone's questions, but he allowed a CCTV reporter to connect with him temporarily. CCTV reporter Bing Bing, with her usual sweet smile, got straight to the point. The United States recently experienced a solar eclipse, and the new US president declared it the nation's patron saint. Professor Lin Feng, what are your thoughts on this? Do you know the origins of the so-called giant dog god? Of course I do, Lin Feng nodded with a slight smile. Its name isn't the giant dog god, and it's definitely not the patron saint of the United States. As for its specific origins, I won't reveal them just yet. I'll announce them at the press conference next Tuesday. Bing Bing raised an eyebrow and smiled. Professor Lin, are you keeping us in suspense? I suppose so. The shock value was still rising sharply, and the US media had only exerted less than 30% of its power. Could they still publicize the Roaring Sky Dog's origin so publicly at this moment? Keep it a secret for now, let them work themselves to death. Once the shock factor has worn off, reveal the truth. Even if the Americans are furious, they'll be left fuming, helpless. Meanwhile, the rest of the world, spurred by this dramatic reversal, will spark renewed interest in Roaring Sky Dog, stirring up a second wave of excitement and generating even more shock factor. Lin Feng's calculations were well underway, with a multi-step plan already in mind. Unlike Lin Feng's leisurely pace, the US held a press conference that evening. The spokesperson for the press conference was a congresswoman renowned for her blonde beauty. She, too, got straight to the point. Today, on behalf of all the top leaders of the United States, I announce to the world that we, too, have a god of our own. Perhaps not just one, but this is the first god to appear before everyone, our giant dog god. As America's patron god, it immediately demonstrated its unrivaled power, swallowing even the sun in one gulp. This undoubtedly proves its might, a reporter from the American media asked. Have American officials determined the strength of the giant dog god? Who do you think is stronger, the giant dog god or the Chinese god? The representative smiled. At this point, that's unanswerable. No one knows whether the giant dog god exerted his full strength in the Washington incident. In the Lenten incident, the Chinese god appeared to have exerted his full might. Until we have more data on both sides, I believe all discussions on this matter should proceed with caution. His words were flawless, seemingly modest, but in reality, they were secretly disparaging Yang Jian. The Chinese reporters present all frowned slightly. After the representative finished her flawless statement, she continued. Of course, as an American, I naturally believe that our American gods are the most powerful in the world. This incident didn't allow the giant dog god to unleash his full power, but I believe this god will make more than just a one-time appearance. We still have a long time to explore its potential. Regardless, the giant dog god is our American patron god. The pride of us all. Her tone grew increasingly passionate, and she finally raised her fist high. This gesture was immediately broadcast through the media to the American audience, and many were immediately inspired, raising their fists high and shouting, "Long live the giant dog god." The Chinese reporter interviewing the scene was much calmer and raised his hand to ask a question. I would like to ask, how did the U.S. authorities confirm the existence of this giant dog god? In what era did the giant dog god operate, and what is its origin and history? This question left the representative speechless. Regarding the shadow beast, the U.S. top brass knew nothing at all. To conceal the Hydra incident, they'd forced the title of giant dog god upon it, quickly convincing the world that the United States had a patron saint. But no matter how they planned, they couldn't conjure up a vast body of evidence and history. Aside from the name giant dog god, nothing about the shadowy beast remained a mystery. There was no way they could fabricate it. The representative, however, maintained a degree of composure and spoke calmly. How we discovered the existence of this giant dog god is a state secret and cannot be disclosed for the time being. As for the time when the giant dog god lived, it was approximately several thousand years ago. Approximately, the Chinese reporter immediately seized on the flaw. If there's already definitive evidence, why use such a broad term as approximately? The representative's smile faltered, and anger raged within her. If this weren't a live press conference, she would have personally kicked the man out. 163. Chapter 162. Lin Feng knows the origin of the giant dog god? 162. Does Lin Feng know the origins of the giant dog god? 2024-09-10. Author, Good Monster. Chapter 162. Does Lin Feng know the origins of the giant dog god? The Chinese reporter didn't even give her a chance to catch her breath, continuing her questioning. The existence of guardian gods is generally recorded, but after several discontinuities, most of the records have been lost, making them unknown to modern people. Excuse me, these ancient mythological records are thousands or even tens of thousands of years away from modern times. Why are they considered state secrets by the U.S. government? Could you explain in detail the reasons why the research evidence cannot be released for the time being? The representative's fake smile almost broke. In fact, the United States has only been established for a little over 200 years, and there haven't been any interruptions or loss of historical records in that time. So where did you get this sudden record of a patron saint? If, as you say, the patron saint existed thousands of years ago, then is it protecting this continent or the United States? The representative was surprised that the Chinese reporter present today had completely changed her usual modest and gentle demeanor and become so aggressive. She almost wanted to slap the words "you're lying" in her face. However, she had encountered this situation before and knew the corresponding response by heart. The female representative immediately took on an angry look. Are you questioning our patron saint? Do you think that only China deserves a patron saint, and that other countries are unworthy? With just 2 sentences, she immediately stirred hostility from every country except China. Thanks to the media's overwhelming propaganda, Americans had come to regard this giant dog deity as their spiritual faith. While people in other countries didn't share such deep feelings, China had its own patron saint, and the United States also had its own. Perhaps the next patron saint would appear in their country. Therefore, both groups supported the representative, and their expressions immediately darkened, their glances toward the Chinese reporter rather unkindly. The representative took note of everyone's expressions, his lips curling slightly. The U.S. government had considered the questions raised by the Chinese reporter. But under the horrific consequences of the Hydra incident being leaked and the government's complete loss of credibility, they had to unveil this giant dog god, even if they were completely unsure of its origins, title, or whether it was America's patron saint. If anyone dared to raise questions, they would be dealt with. The Chinese reporter, sensing the hostility around him, paused. He wasn't afraid of anything. He had China behind him, with 2 genuine patron saints. With such a strong backing, He felt confident in his words. He said calmly, "Before I left for this conference, I contacted the domestic media. They told me that Professor Lin Feng has concluded that this giant dog god has no connection to the United States, and isn't even called the giant dog god." These few words stirred up 1,000 waves. The reporter had clearly mentioned 2 words, Lin Feng. If anyone else had said these words, they would have immediately mocked him, perhaps even attacked him on the spot out of anger at the giant dog god's denial. But the name Lin Feng was different. His close relationship with the Chinese gods, his contributions to the moon landing program, and his ability to turn the tide when the Lenten incident seemed hopeless, each of these events had made this man practically a saint, his prestige comparable to that of a god. If he had said this, then people really needed to seriously consider the truth of the story. Many turned to look at the representative again, this time with a tinge of confusion and questioning. The representative panicked, having thought that appealing to patriotism would silence all doubts. Unexpectedly, this cunning reporter brought up Lin Feng. Besides worrying about a reversal of public opinion, the female representative was even more concerned. If Lin Feng had said that, did the giant dog god truly have no connection to the United States? Because there was no evidence, no trace, to prove the giant dog god's existence, it was a Schrodinger's equation that could be disproven or proven. The female representative knew she was fabricating, but she also held on to a glimmer of hope. What if it was true? What if? Everything has its ups and downs, right? But if Lin Feng said it wasn't true, then there was an 80–90% chance it wasn't. In a split second, the female representative was already sweating profusely. Just as she was stunned, her boss's angry voice rang through her earpiece. "What are you standing there for? Are you trying to ruin such a crucial press conference? You're just insisting it's the giant dog god. Who the hell is Lin Feng? How dare a Chinese person dictate to our patron saint?" The female representative, barely coming to her senses, put on an angry front and repeated her boss's instructions. Many still harbored doubts, but after hearing the female representative's resounding words, many rednecks immediately believed them without a second thought and began to shout. "Yes, Lin Feng has close ties with the Chinese gods. What does that have to do with us Americans? Our giant dog god doesn't need a Chinese person telling him what to do. Long live the giant dog god who defends America and freedom. Anyone who talks nonsense will be torn to pieces by the reject dog god." Many reporters at the scene asked the Chinese reporter. "Professor Lin Feng explained the origins of the giant dog god? What did he say specifically? Can you tell us?" The Chinese reporter shook his head. "Professor Lin Feng hasn't announced the origins of the giant dog god. He said he'll wait until next Tuesday's press conference to share everything he knows." The American reporters rolled their eyes at this, and the female representative, feeling emboldened, sneered. "So it's just empty talk. You Chinese are a bit too arrogant. As for us having no evidence, aren't you also shouting without evidence? I think the Chinese are just getting cocky. They think they are so great just because they have 2 guardian gods. They're jealous when they see we have a giant dog god. I just can't believe a Chinese person could possibly know the history of our country." The representative's outburst was almost like a shrew, but the internet echoed the sentiment. Many reporters at the scene were also in a state of uncertainty, and no one raised a finger to refute. The Chinese reporter remained unmoved, calmly saying, "Yes or no, we'll know next Tuesday." His demeanor was so calm that many Americans watching the live broadcast were nervous. But even more rednecks remained furious. "If you knew, why didn't you announce it right away? Why wait until next Tuesday? You Chinese are clearly guilty of something and are working overtime to slander our patron saint of the United States. The Chinese are so rude and uncultured that they actually came to our patron saint of the United States press conference to act like a riot. If the diplomats don't warn China, I'm going to protest in the streets. This is a blatant disrespect for the United States." 164. Chapter 163, The Evidence Was Too Carelessly Forged. 164. Chapter 163, The Evidence Was Too Carelessly Fabricated. 2024-09-10 Author, Good Monster. Chapter 163, The Evidence Was Too Carelessly Fabricated. Such indignant comments flooded Twitter, with some even commenting on the interim president's tweet, demanding he immediately issue a warning to China in the name of the White House. But the interim president had no such plans for the time being. If others didn't know, surely he didn't? The United States currently had no supporting evidence regarding the giant dog god. If that Chinese professor truly knew something, A head-on debate would surely put the US at a disadvantage. So the priority now wasn't to debate, but to work tirelessly to produce evidence. In the presidential office, many of the surviving high-ranking officials and media giants were summoned. The interim president spoke first. We must not only fabricate the giant dog god's origins, but also make them appear as noble as possible, so that they can rival the two guardian gods already known in China. A summoned historian frowned slightly. The problem is, there's no record of the giant dog god in our history. Even if it's a fabrication, there should be some solid evidence. His attitude was harsh, his tone a bit aggressive. He had genuinely believed the story of the giant dog god as America's patron saint, excitedly eager to explore the ancient volumes of the major libraries. He hadn't expected to be brought here by agents the moment he left home. He was told that the government knew nothing about the giant dog god's origins, and now he was being asked to help fabricate a story to deceive the public. As a historian, how could he have ever fabricated his country's history? But with the government's threats and inducements, he had no choice but to join the discussion. Even so, his attitude remained quite negative. A media mogul across from him chuckled and said, "Professor John's words make sense, but it's actually not that difficult to create an original. Antiquity technology is very advanced now, and all we need to do is take a few simple photos and short videos and upload them to the internet. We try to make the images as blurry as possible and the text as archaic as possible. It's pretty easy to fool most people. What about the remaining few intelligent people?" Professor John snorted in rebuttal. The media mogul continued to smile. Since they are intelligent people, they must know how dangerous it is to stand up and refute their country's beliefs. They will definitely shut up and keep quiet. Professor John had nothing else to say and could only change the subject. Even if we want to forge the original, we can't do it in English. We have to use the local indigenous hieroglyphics to forge it to be authentic, but the local indigenous people of Mizhou, let alone writing, are almost all killed. Where can we see their writing? This is actually the easiest. There are not many people in the world who are interested in ancient writing. Even if we make up a set of nonsense writing by ourselves, no one will notice that it is wrong. The important thing is to find some existing indigenous people to endorse the history and texts we created. The interim president nodded when he heard this. Indeed, this is crucial. Although the suppression of the indigenous people was severe back then, there must have been one or two beautiful individuals who intermarried with us and left behind bloodlines. Let's look in this direction. If we can't find one, we'll find someone with darker skin and a family history of mixed blood to disguise them. As for their story, they'll say their indigenous elders have passed down orally that a guardian deity does exist on this continent, but it hasn't appeared in ages, so they don't know the stories are true. All the stories were quickly finalized, and all the evidence was quickly produced. The next day, at 8 a.m. U.S. time, the U.S. government launched a website to educate the public about the giant dog god. Prior to this, major media outlets had heavily promoted the website's launch, so much so that upon its release, it was flooded with visitors, overwhelming the server. Many people cursed the slow server, but many others continued to browse the page despite the slowdown, finding it increasingly eye-opening. It turns out the giant dog god is actually the patron saint of the American continent. Once, it enjoyed offerings from the indigenous people and provided them with protection. Later, with the establishment of the United States, the indigenous and white peoples completely merged, becoming one. And so the giant dog god became the patron saint of America. The freedom and peace of America deeply moved the giant dog god. So, when America itself faces a crisis, it appears, the great giant dog god. The great America. From today on, I no longer believe in God or Jehovah. I only believe in the giant dog god. A wave of online worship of the giant dog god quickly swept the world. The most enthusiastic were, naturally, the residents of the Washington, D.C., area hardest hit by the disaster. Some have even offered to become popes, guiding everyone to worship the giant dog god according to the indigenous rituals described on the website. Naturally, this enthusiasm was accompanied by dissatisfaction with China and Lin Feng. Previously, only China had a patron saint, and the relationship between the suddenly emerging giant dog god and the United States was unknown. Now that the government had confirmed the giant dog god as America's patron saint, countless American rednecks immediately felt their backs stiffened. So what if you don't have Sun Wukong and Yang Jian? We have the giant dog god. Our god is far more powerful than yours. Consequently, their fear of Lin Feng diminished, and their words became more brazen. Many netizens clamored that if Lin Feng dared say anything against the dog god, the government would have to declare war on China. But these people never imagined that their fervor and anger would transform into shock points and flow towards Lin Feng. Lin Feng had originally had no interest in the American counterfeit website, but Professor Feng Min had specifically directed it to him, so he clicked on it. He was shocked to see how impressive American counterfeiters really are. The website displayed various reproductions of aged parchment, murals, and analyses of ancient texts, all of which were convincing. However, the use of indigenous endorsements was somewhat lacking. Why are all these half-bloods so dark? Darker than those Sahara guys? And even here among the natives, Lin Feng couldn't help but grumble. And when he saw the priesthood ranking at the bottom, he burst into laughter. The god who controls darkness and shadows, guarding the Mi continent at every nightfall. How dare you say that? Howling Sky Dog appears in broad daylight, how can it be associated with darkness? Lin Feng grumbled as he waved his hand, calling over the Sky Dog, who was playing around nearby. You're really showing off now. Do you know what the Americans are saying about you? Lin Feng said as he placed his phone in front of Sky Dog. Sky Dog might be a dog, but it possessed divine powers, so it could understand the unfamiliar text. It barked a few times, its face full of disdain. What a puny human. So surprised by something so rare. They've built their evidence, so it's time for us to build ours too. Let's go find a deserted place to film a video. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelis. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. 273. Chapter 272 New mission appears. 273. Chapter 272, New mission appears 2024, 12. 1-5 Author, Good Monster. Lin Feng was perplexed. Why would Nuwa do this? He looked at Nuwa in confusion, but she simply smiled and offered no explanation. Then, all her strength was transferred to Lin Feng, transforming into a ray of light that gradually dissipated into the air. The entire world seemed to have never existed, and a silence fell. Lin Feng had no time to dwell on it. He could sense that these two people must be hiding a secret, yet he knew nothing of it. At this moment, the power surging within him was incredibly powerful, and he could only sit still and absorb it. Although it was gentle and nourishing to his meridians, he dared not slack off. He began to mobilize the power within him, guiding this newfound strength into his spirit. Soon, he successfully absorbed it. He spread his palms and felt a warm and vital energy surge within them. The system informed him that this was Nuwa's law of creation, and through it, he would gain Nuwa's ability to create humans. Lin Feng curled his lips at this, wondering what use would such power have for him? He had no desire to create a new race, let alone manage one. He had always believed that being alone and free was better. However, possessing such power wasn't a bad thing, at least it would enhance his strength. So, after absorbing this power, he returned to the spot where Fuxi had once stood. This was a restriction set by Fuxi before his disappearance. Only by fulfilling his wish, handing the Nuwa stone to Nuwa, and then returning to this place could he receive his full power. Now, having completed his mission, Lin Feng returned to this place to accept this gift. It was well known that Fuxi possessed unparalleled mastery in comprehending the mysteries of heaven, even rivaling the Hichu and Luoshu. The Hichu and Luoshu were innate magical tools used for divination. The 8 trigrams, which Fuxi had deduced, also possessed this ability. Lin Feng had used the Hichu and Luoshu for deductions before, but always felt it was vague and ambiguous. He had once thought his strength was insufficient, but now he thought that if he could gain Fuxi's ability regarding the 8 trigrams, perhaps he could make up for this deficiency and significantly enhance his cultivation. With this thought in mind, he entered the restricted area without hesitation. When he arrived at the designated location, Fuxi's phantom appeared in midair. Lin Feng informed him of Nuwa's situation, but Fuxi's phantom simply sighed and dissipated into the air. Immediately afterwards, a miraculous power began to surge into Lin Feng's body. He had just received one power, and now another was pouring in, so he naturally didn't dare to neglect it. He quickly sat cross-legged and channeled this power into his Danshan and primordial spirit. He planned to refine this power when he had time. Just then, a zither floated in the sky. Lin Feng recognized it instantly. It was the Fuxi zither in Fuxi's hands. He was just in need of a decent magical weapon. Lin Feng could sense a simple and profound allure from the zither. This zither was one of the ancient divine artifacts, and its power was naturally not to be underestimated. Although he didn't fully grasp Fuxi's specific abilities, he knew he was a master of deduction. To survive in this perilous world, how could Fuxi not possess some life-saving treasure? This kin must possess some mysterious power. He carefully stored the kin in his personal space, intending to study its use in detail later. At that moment, the system informed him that his mission was complete, having successfully obtained the power of the Fuxi kin and the Fuxi human king. Lin Feng returned to the real world and noticed that time was passing unusually slowly. With some time left before the party, he thought he could use this opportunity to thoroughly study his newfound powers. After all, he wasn't familiar with them yet, and using them directly might be detrimental. So, he took out the Fuxi kin and began to explore its power. This power was powerful and unique, capable of unleashing attacks through music. Different tunes triggered different effects, such as stunning, healing, or attacking. He felt the kin held a profound secret, and if used wisely in future battles, it would surely prove immensely effective. Next, he took out the Tai Chi Bagua diagram and used it in conjunction with the Hichu and Luoshu to perform deductions. These two magical instruments shared similar abilities in deducing the mysteries of the universe. If he had relied on his own exploration, it would have taken him an inordinate amount of time. But with the aid of the Hichu and Luoshu, the deduction process would undoubtedly be much easier. Deducing the mysteries of the universe required intense mental focus, and Lin Feng immersed himself in the deduction, completely oblivious. He was so lost in his deductions that time seemed to stand still. A sudden knock at the door pulled him back to reality. He breathed a sigh of relief, thankful he hadn't been completely sucked into that world. It seemed he'd need to set a time limit for his future research, otherwise, if he became obsessed, the consequences would be disastrous. He stood up and opened the door, only to find Black Widow outside. After not seeing her for a long time, he couldn't help but ask curiously, "You're back? How come so soon? What mission were you on this time?" Black Widow told him they had just returned from a mission but had run into some trouble and needed Lin Feng's help. Lin Feng asked curiously, "What's wrong? What happened?" Black Widow explained that they brought Captain America and Hawkeye on this mission, thinking it was foolproof. But something unexpected happened along the way, and Hawkeye was seriously injured. They had to abort the mission and return urgently. However, Hawkeye's injuries were so severe that none of their team could treat him. Ordinary doctors simply couldn't handle injuries of their special physical conditions. Rhodes and the others told Black Widow that Lin Feng had special abilities and might be able to treat Hawkeye. So, hoping against hope, Black Widow sought Lin Feng's help. Lin Feng nodded. He did possess healing powers and could try to tap into the power of Shenin. However, he admitted that his mastery of this power wasn't yet sufficient, and he couldn't guarantee a cure for Hawkeye's injuries. He promised to do his best, but he couldn't guarantee the outcome. Black Widow nodded in understanding. Now she had no other choice but to give Lin Feng a try. She believed in Lin Feng's abilities and his ability to perform miracles. The two of them walked into a room together. Upon entering the room, they found everyone already gathered. When Lin Feng appeared, all eyes were fixed on him. Master Ancient One's expression was filled with worry. While these individuals had sustained some injuries, they weren't serious. With a period of rest, they could all potentially recover. Their recovery abilities were already impressive, but Hawkeye's condition was a cause for concern. His injuries appeared extremely severe, and even Chen Haitian was helpless to fully restore his strength. Chen Haitian wasn't particularly skilled in healing. Right now, he could only place his hopes on Lin Feng, believing his extraordinary powers might hold the key to a cure. Therefore, when Lin Feng entered the room, everyone placed their hopes on him. Lin Feng sensed the crowd's anticipation and felt a sense of pressure. He wasn't sure he could fully heal them, but he could only do his best. Noting that none of the injuries present were too serious, he immediately harnessed the power of the Shenin clan to begin healing them. Everyone saw a soft green light emanating from him, a warm and gentle glow that slowly flowed towards the injured. As the light shone upon them, they suddenly felt refreshed, their wounds gradually fading. Even the scars shrank at a noticeable speed. Everyone was astonished by Lin Feng's ability. They had never imagined such miraculous healing powers existed. They had been on missions for a long time, and injuries were commonplace. With someone like Lin Feng by their side, they were practically invincible. Seeing such power, everyone's eyes sparkled. After a while, Everyone's injuries had healed, and Lin Feng didn't seem to have consumed much of his strength. Lin Feng's power was now immense, and unless he was engaged in large-scale combat, his strength would be depleted very slowly. Therefore, such healing was almost insignificant to him. However, when he glanced at Hawkeye, he frowned. Hawkeye's blindness presented a thorny problem. If his eyes were still there, his healing abilities might have been useful, but now he had no idea how to begin. He frowned, pondering how to treat Hawkeye's injury. Suddenly, an idea struck him. Perhaps he could replace Hawkeye's eye. He had just mastered the power of Nuwa. He tried to focus this energy in his hands, and a gentle golden light appeared in his palm. This light filled everyone present with an inexplicable sense of familiarity. Lin Feng, holding the light, slowly walked towards Hawkeye, chanting an incantation. The light began to surge towards Hawkeye's eyes. Everyone around was filled with curiosity. Could this light truly restore Hawkeye's sight? They knew that ordinary injuries could be healed, but Hawkeye's eye was gone. Could it possibly grow back? After a while, Lin Feng lowered his hand and sighed deeply. Everyone thought he had failed, but just then, Hawkeye slowly opened his eyes. Everyone was stunned to see that his eyes had actually been restored. The sight filled them with disbelief. Could such a method really exist? They had initially been skeptical, but now they had witnessed a miracle. Everyone came forward to inquire about Hawkeye's recovery. Hawkeye tried using his new eyes. Although he still felt a little uncomfortable, he could sense that they were even more powerful than his old ones. He could see more subtle details with them, and his vision was also much greater than before. However, he hadn't mastered this power yet. He sensed that once he had fully mastered it and adapted to it, his strength would be greatly enhanced. Everyone was shocked by this news. Even the most advanced medical skills could only partially restore his vision. They hadn't expected Lin Feng's method to not only restore his vision but also enhance his strength. They didn't know what the method was, but they found it incredible. Lin Feng was truly formidable. After Lin Feng healed everyone's injuries, he sat down peacefully. Previously, Black Widow had mentioned that they had suffered heavy losses during a mission, and everyone's injuries were quite serious. Conventional medical treatments were nearly ineffective against them. If Lin Feng hadn't fortuitously gained access to the healing powers of the Shannon clan, their injuries would have been difficult to control. Even if they recovered, they would have been left with numerous scars. Lin Feng was filled with curiosity about this mission. What kind of mission could have caused such severe damage to them? These individuals were formidable in the universe. Few could pose a threat to them, let alone a formidable team. To injure an entire team must be an extremely powerful force. Black Widow sighed softly and spoke slowly. Our mission is to locate a crystal, extremely rare in the universe. We finally obtained a clue about it, and were sent to search for it. However, for some reason, the crystal seems to be protected by the universe, a mysterious force locking it tightly, preventing us from approaching. We have tried to use energy to forcibly break the barrier and seize the crystal, but to no avail. This power is completely different from the energy we are familiar with. It is extremely strange and we have never seen it before. Hawkeye and his companions also tried to force their way through the barrier, but they were countered by their own power and became what they are now. It seems that our mission may be difficult to complete. Lin Feng was filled with doubt after hearing this. He had never heard of such a power in the universe. But then he thought, the universe is so vast, so it is reasonable to have unknown powers. Black Widow told him that after everyone's injuries have stabilized, they will continue to the location, because the mission is not yet completed. In fact, Lin Feng did not have high hopes for this mission. Simply because of the backlash of his own power, he had become like this. He truly didn't believe that just a few of them could break the barrier and obtain what they desired. However, at this moment, an inexplicable feeling welled up within Lin Feng. He hurriedly used the Bagua formation diagram he had just obtained to make calculations. He discovered that if he went there, he might find something unexpected. This discovery astounded him. He had never imagined such a magical place existed in the universe. So, he decided to go with him. At least he'd have someone to look after him along the way. Upon hearing his decision, Black Widow was overjoyed. She knew Lin Feng's immense strength, rumored to even surpass Thanos in combat power. Furthermore, he now possessed miraculous healing abilities. That place was unpredictable, and this trip might result in further injury. With Lin Feng by their side, they had an added layer of security, no longer fearing injury during battle. After all, Lin Feng's healing abilities were well known, and they didn't seem to consume much energy. He had just healed so many people by himself, yet showed no sign of fatigue. Black Widow immediately reported the matter to her superiors, who quickly approved it and advised them to be careful. 165. Chapter 164 Press Conference? Blind Date. 164, Press Conference? Blind Date, 2024-09-10 Author, Good Monster Chapter 164, Press Conference? Blind Date. Tuesday, Yenching University in China's capital. The news that Lin Feng would hold the press conference there had already become the focus of the entire world. It was only 9:20, and the auditorium inside and outside Yenching University was already packed. Besides students from the university and mythology enthusiasts from across the country, there were also reporters dispatched from all over the world, especially those from the United States. After nearly a week of hype, the entire United States was in a frenzy. Anyone who dared to say that the giant dog god was not American would be beaten to death on the spot. Under such circumstances, they naturally wanted to eat Lin Feng alive for publicly claiming that the giant dog god had nothing to do with the United States. Even though it was already dark in the United States and time for bed due to the time difference, many people were still waiting with wide eyes for the live broadcast, ready to lash out at Lin Feng through the screen if they disagreed. At 9:25, Lin Feng arrived at the auditorium, surrounded by numerous history professors. Many students were his idols, and the sight of him immediately erupted in excitement, with screams, cheers, and greetings. But with a wave of Lin Feng's hand, everyone fell silent, their pace even more uniform than military training. Professor Feng Min, standing beside Lin Feng, checked his watch and said, "It's almost 9:30. Let's take our seats." Lin Feng nodded calmly, took the center seat, and announced the start of the press conference. "I know what everyone wants to know most, but before we get into that, we must first clarify the story of another deity, the great god Yang Jian of China. Yang Jian is called Erlang Xian Sheng's Henjin because he is the second son of Yao Ji, the Jade Emperor's sister. From Yao Ji's quest for immortality to splitting a mountain to save her mother, Lin Feng succinctly explained Erlang Shen's journey to immortality. He then recounted some of Erlang Shen's deeds after his ascension, focusing on his battle with son Wukong. He didn't deliberately use any twists and turns to whet the audience's appetite, but Yang Jian's experience alone was enough to make everyone yearn for it. Even the American reporter, who was deliberately trying to stir up trouble and steer the conversation towards the giant dog god, was somewhat captivated. After finishing his account of Yang Jian's story, Lin Feng said to the crowd, "Now you can ask questions freely. Feel free to ask anything about the great god Yang Jian." The American reporter, barely recovering from his shock, was about to ask about the giant dog god, but the Chinese reporter beat him to the punch. Professor Lin Feng, currently, China has two patron saints, Sun Wukong and Yang Jian. However, only Yang Jian appeared during the London crisis. I wonder if this is because Yang Jian is closer to humans. Also, I noticed when you were describing Yang Jian's life, you mentioned that his father was an ordinary human. Could this be one of the reasons he's so concerned about humanity's fate? Lin Feng smiled and nodded. You have a keen eye for detail. Indeed, if we had to choose the deity closest to humans and most willing to protect them, Yang Jian would definitely be the first choice, because he does have mortal blood in his veins. Not only that, his sister is also a deity willing to protect humans. This is all related to their life stories. As he finished speaking, another person raised their hand. This was a historian who studies Western mythology. Professor Lin, do all children born from the union of gods and humans possess divine powers? Yang Jian and his sister are both gods, but what about his brother? If his brother hadn't died, could he have become a god? Lin Feng continued to smile. In fact, the possibility is very high. In Chinese mythology, bloodline inheritance has always been a key concept. Not only Yang Jian and his sister, but even Yang Jian's sister's son inherited their mother's divine power to a certain extent. Based on this data, it's roughly confirmed that divine power can be inherited through bloodline. However, the exact amount inherited, and the ultimate level of divine power and status achieved, are not entirely determined by genetics. The historian's eyes lit up. The others were also excited. If the offspring of a marriage between gods and humans also possessed divine powers, wouldn't it mean the relationship between the two was very close? There was certainly the possibility of even closer ties in the future. Lin Feng was clearly aware that the looks of many female viewers immediately changed. A female reporter immediately raised her hand and asked, "Professor Lin Feng, has the great god Yang Jian ever been married? Was his partner a god or a human? Today, would he be open to marrying an ordinary person? What type of woman does he prefer?" The questions grew increasingly blunt, and Lin Feng, unable to bear it any longer, quickly called a halt. "These kinds of questions involve the great god Yang Jian's privacy, so I won't answer them. Let's move on to the next section. If this continues, the press conference will turn into a blind date." As soon as Lin Feng finished speaking, a question, spoken in somewhat unstandard Mandarin, rang out. "Professor Lin Feng, you said earlier that you knew the origins of the giant dog god. Could you please tell us more about him now?" Everyone fell silent, save for the clatter of cameras. Lin Feng wasn't surprised at all. How could the US miss out on this press conference? After all, thanks to their collaborative efforts, Roaring Sky Dog had become a global presence. The so-called giant dog god had become almost a totem that held the US together. If it weren't for this, the blow his next words would have dealt to the US might not have been so severe. As he thought about it, a hint of playfulness darkened his smile. "Oh, you mean that dog?" The American reporter was immediately enraged. "It's our American god. Professor Lin Feng, if you're a cultured and well-educated person, please respect our gods. If you continue to slander our gods in public like this, I have the right to file a complaint with the relevant authorities." The audience watching the live broadcast were also confused by Lin Feng's attitude. Did they hear it wrong? Why did Lin Feng refer to the American god in such a nonchalant manner? While everyone knew it was a dog, and privately commented on videos and photos of the dog, "Big dog is so cute," in all formal settings, the official US name, giant dog god, should be used with respect. Could it be that Lin Feng said this because the giant dog god's appearance broke China's monopoly on the gods? Many people wondered, and the American people erupted in outrage. "Stupid. Narrow-minded. The yellow monkey is disgusting. How dare he insult our giant dog god like that? Giant dog god, please punish this foolish human. Does he think he can rest easy just because he has good relations with the Chinese gods? Our giant dog god is the most powerful. That Chinese pig will pay the price for his words and actions." All of these reactions were not unexpected by Lin Feng. By stirring up the emotions of these rednecks to the maximum, he could achieve the most powerful slap in the face after the reversal and also profit from the sudden surge in shock value. 274. Chapter 273. The activation source is the Rubik's Cube. 273. The activation source is a Rubik's Cube. 2024-12-16. Author, Good Monster. Meanwhile, Thor had also arrived. He'd been training to improve his strength, having previously been idle. Ever since the last incident, he'd been practicing non-stop, and now felt his strength had greatly improved. But practicing in this place all the time wasn't the solution. He longed to venture out and, upon hearing that Lin Feng was going on a mission, Thor felt a pang of desire, wanting to join the mission as well. Black Widow frowned slightly at this. She didn't doubt Thor's abilities, but the place was incredibly eerie. If it weren't for the mission, she wouldn't have wanted to go herself. However, the fact that someone had offered to go was surprising. Seeing Thor's eager eyes, the group decided not to refuse him and prepared to take him along. Thor was overjoyed at the news and immediately went back to pack, ready to embark on the mission with him. In the open area of the square, a massive spaceship sat quietly anchored. This would be their voyage. After preparing, everyone gathered. Thor, carrying a small suitcase, looked relaxed, earning a few helpless glances from the others. This mission was fraught with danger, and the previously formidable team had suffered heavy losses. Had it not been for Lin Feng's miraculous healing abilities, Hawkeye would likely have been doomed. Thor was incredibly careless, acting as if nothing had happened, even carrying so much luggage that the uninformed might have thought they were on vacation. In comparison, the others seemed much more normal, simply packing the necessities on board. As their strength grew, daily necessities became less important, and the preparations naturally reduced. The mission was expected to be short, and if all went well, they would return quickly. They didn't hold out high hopes for this mission. At most, they would document the situation and bring it back to Earth for further study. As for breaking the barrier, the possibility was slim, otherwise the previous team wouldn't have suffered such severe injuries. They boarded the ship. While the interior wasn't as spacious as the exterior suggested, it was perfectly adequate. Besides them, Lin Feng also spotted a stranger. Black Widow quickly introduced her. "This is Scarlet Witch." Lin Feng suddenly realized it was her. Her strength was indeed not to be underestimated. Apparently, the previous incident had heightened their vigilance, and they had brought a master along this time. Lin Feng was filled with excitement and anticipation, wondering what lay ahead. However, the divination told him that this mission would undoubtedly bring him significant opportunities. Black Widow launched her spaceship and headed for her destination. Along the way, she revealed her destination, Doralala Planet. Thor couldn't help but laugh at the name, and Lin Feng couldn't help but chuckle as well. The name was truly unique. Who knew who had chosen it? However, Black Widow's expression was solemn, and she didn't smile at all. Lin Feng frowned and asked, "Is there something special about this place? You seem wary." Black Widow nodded, sighed, and brought up an image on the screen. It was a seemingly ordinary constellation, nothing out of the ordinary. As everyone was puzzled, she manipulated her hands, and a faint black shadow emerged where several planets intersected. Zooming in, she discovered it was a planet. Its existence was so bizarre that it would be impossible to detect without close observation. Black Widow explained, "This place is protected by a mysterious force. Its existence is undetectable unless you get close. I don't know what that force is, but there are indeed artificial remains, indicating a past of life. The crystal we're looking for is there." As she spoke, the spaceship had already passed through the gap between the two planets, successfully arriving at the dark planet and plunging into it. As the group slowly disembarked and stepped onto the planet, they were surprised to find that its environment was quite similar to Earth's. Despite the lack of light, the climate wasn't unusual. Instead, a warm feeling permeated the air. Even more surprising, the air composition was similar to Earth's. They reasoned that if Earth truly had a plan to colonize it, this would undoubtedly be an excellent choice. Unfortunately, this place seemed to harbor dangers, and truly settling on it would require overcoming these unknown risks. Furthermore, this planet appeared to have no interstellar expansion capabilities. Meanwhile, Black Widow, holding an instrument, led the group in a certain direction. Suddenly, a soft chime from the instrument caught everyone's attention. Thor pointed into the distance and exclaimed, "Look, what's that?" Following his gaze, they saw a dilapidated castle standing before them, its surface deeply scarred by the passage of time. The castle's presence confirmed Black Widow's earlier suspicion that life might have once existed here. After all, such a structure couldn't have formed naturally. They slowly approached the castle, filled with curiosity. As Lin Feng approached, he felt a strange power resonate with something within him, much like the feeling he had experienced when wielding the power of the demon Emperor Dijin. Soon, they arrived at the castle's entrance, only to find a closed door covered in strange symbols. They examined it closely, but were unable to decipher its meaning. However, their goal this time was to find the energy crystal, not conduct archaeological research, so they paid little attention to the symbols. Just then, Thor rushed forward, ready to push the door open. However, as his hand touched the door, he was repelled by a powerful force. Even though he quickly mobilized his strength to resist, he was still thrown far away. After Thor regained his balance, he felt a surge of power within him, as if he had been attacked, causing him extreme discomfort. Black Widow wanted to warn him, but it was too late. She thought, let Thor suffer a little, so that he wouldn't be so reckless in the future. Seeing this, Lin Feng stepped forward to check Thor's injuries. After confirming that he was not seriously injured, he helped him to his feet. Black Widow explained to the others that they had tried to open this door before, but were similarly repulsed by the power within, resulting in Hawkeye's injuries. Faced with this tightly closed door, everyone was helpless. They knew that opening it would require considerable effort. So, they all stepped forward to try, but without exception, they were all sent flying by the force of the door. Just then, Thor ran over to Lin Feng and said with a playful smile, "Lin Feng, do you want to give it a try? This feels really exciting." Everyone looked at Thor with disdain. This guy had truly forgotten the pain after his wound healed. They didn't know Lin Feng's strength, only thinking of him as a witness responsible for logistics. Just now, the injuries they had sustained from overexerting themselves had been easily healed by Lin Feng. Asking him to face such an attack was a joke. However, to everyone's surprise, Lin Feng actually nodded, indicating his willingness to try. Scarlet Witch watched Lin Feng's actions, filled with confusion. Could it be that someone with only healing powers could accomplish something that even their powerful counterparts couldn't? Except for Thor and Black Widow, who knew of Lin Feng's strength, Everyone else shared this question. Lin Feng, ignoring the others' opinions, walked straight to the door. He stared at the symbols on the door. Although they felt familiar, he couldn't recall their origin. So, he took a deep breath and channeled the power of Emperor Jun, preparing to investigate. The Emperor Jun power gathered in Lin Feng's hands slowly flowed out, as if resonating with some surrounding force. The previously silent gate, as if sensing a shared aura, began to tremble slightly, then silently and unimpededly opened on its own, as if welcoming its occupant home. The crowd watching this scene was filled with astonishment. They had tried various methods to open the gate, but all had failed, and Hawkeye had even been injured. Now, Lin Feng had effortlessly opened it simply by releasing his own power. How could this not spark curiosity? Inquiring glances filled the air, filled with confusion. Black Widow sighed beside him. She knew the gate's immense rebound force, having experienced it firsthand. However, this force was powerless against Lin Feng, dissipating instantly as the gate swung open. She firmly believed that Lin Feng possessed some special ability, far beyond the reach of brute force. Seeing this, Thor felt rather resigned. He believed his diligent training had narrowed the gap between him and Lin Feng, at least in terms of strength. But just now, when he tried to open the door, he was met with a powerful repulsion, while Lin Feng had managed it effortlessly. This unbalanced him, and he couldn't help but mutter, "What special ability? I was clearly almost able to open it just now." Lin Feng just happened to do it by chance. As soon as he finished speaking, he was met with disdainful glances from everyone around him. Lin Feng turned to Thor, smiled, and patted his head. While the smile was gentle, it seemed strange to Thor, and his heart began to flutter. He quickly took 2 steps back and said apologetically, "Oh, I was just kidding. Of course, I'm in awe of your skills, big brother." Seeing this, Lin Feng was also amused and embarrassed. Thor's will to survive was quite strong. Seeing this, Black Widow quickly stopped their quarrel and urged everyone to prepare to enter the door. After gathering their equipment and getting ready, they stepped into the mysterious space. Upon entering, they discovered the door behind them had vanished, and the ground beneath their feet seemed to cease to exist. A strange feeling washed over them. This place was completely different from the outside world they knew. The air was filled with a familiar, mysterious power. Lin Feng, due to his different cultivation system, could clearly sense the richness of spiritual energy here, far surpassing that of the outside world. Looking around, they noticed numerous tiny fragments scattered around. While seemingly insignificant, upon closer inspection, each one imbued with the power of the stars, emitting a terrifying aura. Everyone marveled at the fragments, unsure of their true nature. Lin Feng instantly recognized them as fragments of the galaxy, shattered by some powerful force and scattered here. He wondered what force could have destroyed so many galaxies. However, they had no time for further investigation and continued their exploration. After a long trek, they finally saw a dazzling light ahead, piercing the darkness and guiding them forward. Black Widow was thrilled upon seeing the light. She suspected that this might be their target, the mysterious crystal. She led her men forward at an accelerated pace. When they reached the source of the light, they saw a crystal suspended in midair, its form shifting unpredictably, seemingly different with every glance. Although no one could describe its exact form, Black Widow was certain it was the crystal they had been seeking. It lay hidden within this mysterious space, awaiting discovery. Upon hearing Black Widow's words, everyone smiled with relief. Initially, seeing Hawkeye and the others injured, they had assumed this mission would be extremely difficult, perhaps even life-threatening, and their hearts had been weighing heavily. Unexpectedly, they had found their target so quickly, their mission nearly complete, and could leave the area. Naturally, everyone felt relieved and happy. Some impatient individuals eagerly rushed forward to seize the crystal, but after taking a few steps, they were pulled back by Lin Feng behind them. The individual looked at Lin Feng with confusion, wondering why he was stopping them. Lin Feng explained that he had just observed a powerful force emanating from the crystal. This force was extremely volatile and would automatically attack anyone who approached it. If he rushed forward, he would likely be torn to shreds by the force. He shared his speculation, but some present were unconvinced, believing it was merely Lin Feng's conjecture and not the true reality. They were confident in their own abilities, believing that even if they couldn't obtain the crystal, they could still escape safely. Seeing their determination to test the waters, Lin Feng stopped trying and prepared to let them go. However, just then, Black Widow, who was conducting a test with an instrument nearby, spoke up. "If I were you, I would obey Lin Feng. Otherwise, I guarantee you'll be pulverized before you even get close to the crystal." This stunned the man, who dared not to act rashly. Perhaps he still had some doubts about Lin Feng's words, but Black Widow's words compelled his belief. After all, Black Widow was the most powerful among them and knew everything about the situation. Since she said so, there must be something wrong with the crystal. Black Widow reviewed the analytical data on the instrument and announced that the crystal was emitting a violent and uncontrollable radioactive energy. If anyone gets close to it, everyone present might be torn into powder. After saying this, she turned her gaze towards Lin Feng, her heart filled with curiosity about him. 166. Chapter 165. Whether you admit it or not, it's still a dog. 166. Chapter 165. Whether you recognize it or not, it's still a dog. 2024-09-10. Author, Good Monster. Chapter 165. Whether you recognize it or not, it's still a dog. No matter what name you give it, from a biological point of view, it's a dog of the genus Canis, family Carnivora. To say it's not a dog is to ignore the facts. Do you think you'll be happy if I say it's a cat? If you can't accept this statement, then perhaps you will find it even more difficult to accept what I say next, Lin Feng said jokingly, his light smile revealing a completely undisguised provocation. Good, many Chinese people immediately cheered online. I've been fed up with those bragging Americans for a while now. A dog god talks about being so powerful, and if he's really that powerful, how come Lun suddenly vanished? Exactly. He's praising one and putting one down, secretly saying our great god Yang Jian isn't strong enough. If great god Yang Jian wasn't strong enough, those American women who were boasting would have died a long time ago. Well done, Professor Lin. You should be so tough with these ignorant Americans, but some who knew Lin Feng well, like Professor Feng Min, who was standing beside him, found this strange. He wasn't usually arrogant, on the contrary, he was very gentle and polite. He never bullied anyone, and he certainly didn't go out of his way to mock them. What a strange performance today. Inside the White House, the interim president was furious. He immediately had someone call the reporter and angrily issued an order. Warn this Lin Feng. The giant dog god is the pride of the United States. He must apologize immediately. He had originally sent someone to test the waters, fearing that Lin Feng truly knew the giant dog god's origins. He hadn't expected Lin Feng to be so arrogant, mocking him live before hundreds of millions of viewers. If he continued to tolerate this, where would America's prestige be? Receiving his orders, the reporter immediately raised his head and addressed Lin Feng. Professor Lin, your words have aroused the unanimous outrage of the entire United States. You must apologize immediately for your inappropriate remarks about the giant dog god. Otherwise, the United States would rather go to war with China than tolerate such insults. Remember that every word you say interferes with the relationship between China and the United States. If you don't take responsibility for your actions today, you will regret your decision tomorrow. The American reporter spoke with increasing righteousness, but Lin Feng simply scoffed. You named it the giant dog god, yet you deny others the biological name of dog. It's true that you Americans are the type to let officials set fires, but not allow ordinary people to light lamps. But what I'm saying is that this so-called giant dog god is just a dog, no different from a domesticated pet. Everyone in the audience and those watching the live stream scratched their ears in disbelief, wondering if they'd misheard. Lin Feng actually used the word pet in conjunction with the giant dog god. This was an insult to America's patron saint. For a moment, the entire audience fell silent. Even the Chinese official was confused by this statement, but noticing the camera panning in their direction, he immediately gestured in support of Lin Feng. Regardless of what Lin Feng said or did, the US propaganda last week was clear for all to see. Using their own great god Yang Jian to promote the giant dog god, a covert and overt attack, had long been a source of irritation for the Chinese authorities, who had intended to use this press conference to strike back. Unexpectedly, before they could even execute their prepared moves, Lin Feng flashed and unleashed his ultimate. What could they say? All they could do was shout, "Great job! You've done a great job." The American reporter, feeling deceived, was full of words demanding the live stream be muted. But before he could utter any more profanity, his phone suddenly rang. He answered the call, and after a few words from the other end, the reporter's scowl vanished, replaced by a smug smile. "Professor Lin, I told you, Your words and actions have aroused the unanimous outrage of the entire American nation, and now the president has issued an order. If you don't apologize and provide a reasonable explanation for your words and actions, we Americans will deem you a deliberate challenge to the majesty of the giant dog god, the majesty of the United States. Professor Lin, you don't want to see war between the United States and China, do you? Hearing this, all the Chinese people were outraged. Some of them had indeed felt that Lin Feng's words were a bit extreme, and logically speaking, they were not wrong. The United States named a deity the giant dog god. Doesn't that mean it's actually a dog? You call it a dog, but you don't allow others to call it a dog? Just because someone called it a dog, you're going to go to war? You Americans really can't afford that. No problem, we Chinese can. Someone immediately shouted, so what if we start a war? Are we Chinese still afraid of a fight? It seems we didn't defeat you in 1953, and you still want to mess with your Chinese military. The Chinese have never been afraid of a fight. If you Americans dare to use it, we dare to fight back. Many Chinese stood up to support Lin Feng, and the situation instantly became tense. The American reporters were terrified, their palms sweating. You calm down. The US is just issuing a reasonable warning. Lin Feng raised an eyebrow and smiled. Using war as a warning? You Americans really have a lot of power. Seeing his fearlessness, the American reporters' anger, which had just been suppressed by fear, began to rise again. No matter what, you were the first to insult our gods. You challenged America's dignity. If war does break out, it will be entirely your fault. Lin Feng couldn't help but sneer again. I told you wouldn't listen to the truth. He pressed a button, and a video immediately lit up on the screen. Two people appeared in the video, Lin Feng and Yang Jian. Great God Yang Jian, Great God Yang Jian is actually talking to Professor Lin Feng. Professor Lin truly has a close relationship with the gods. In the video, Lin Feng and Yang Jian were talking, but normally, their mouth movements were so subtle that no one could discern what they were saying. However, judging by the video, it appeared that Lin Feng was exercising Yang Jian in a specially constructed arena, testing his punching power. Yang Jian walked over to the punching force meter and threw a light punch, seemingly without much force, before the machine broke down and began to smoke. The audience watched in amazement. I think Great God Yang Jian only hit me in the head, and the machine actually broke. This machine is incredibly fragile. Don't blame the machine. It's used to measure the strength of special forces. Even if an ordinary person hit it with all their might, it might not even make a sound. For a mortal god to hide him like this with one punch. I can only say that there is a difference between gods and humans. Please adjust your frame of reference. Especially Great God Yang Jian, we humans use this for our own entertainment, so please don't try to attack us. The video continued to play, and the scene that appeared was even more shocking. Lin Feng and Yang Jian were actually walking arm in arm in the wild. End of this chapter. Thank you very much for reaching the end. Don't forget to like. Looking for more exclusive content and immediate access? Subscribe to our Patreon. Remember, every like, subscription, or donation encourages us to continue. Thanks to everyone. See you in the next video.